Folks ask me in all my years writing these territories, what's the one story that stays with me? I tell them about a man who bought freedom for $1 and a girl who taught him what it cost. Now I've seen a lot in my time. Seen men kill for land they'd never work. Seen women bury children who never had a chance to grow. Seen justice arrive too late and mercy arrive too early, and sometimes neither one show up at all. But this story, this one's different. It taught me something about grace I never learned from any scripture. And it taught me that redemption don't come clean. It comes with blood on its hands and dust on its knees. And sometimes the best we can hope for is the courage to keep walking forward with the weight. I was 68 years old when I passed through that Texas town. It was autumn of 1869, 4 years after Appomattox, but you wouldn't know the war had ended by looking at the faces. Some wounds don't close with treaties. Some debts don't settle with ink on paper. The town had a name, I suppose. Most places do. But I can't recall it now, and that feels right somehow, because what happened there could have happened anywhere in those days when the law was whatever the man with the badge said it was, and freedom was a word folks used easy but meant hard. I remember the light that autumn, how it fell golden and heavy across the plains, how the dust hung in the air like something waiting to be born or waiting to die, I never could tell which. And I remember thinking as I rode in that first day that this was a place where the past hadn't let go yet. I should have kept riding. I didn't. The road into town was rutted deep from wagon wheels and hard rain. My horse picked his way careful, stepping around the worst of it. A good horse, that one. Better company than most men I'd met. It was late afternoon when I crested the rise and saw the buildings spread out below. Not much to look at. A main street with the usual markers of civilization trying to take root in hard ground. There was a church, though its paint was peeling. A saloon that looked more prosperous than the church, which told you something. A general store. A boarding house with laundry hanging limp in the still air. And at the far end of the street, a sheriff's office with bars on the windows. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not the good kind of quiet. Not the peace of a Sunday morning or the calm after a storm. This was the quiet of people holding their breath, of words swallowed before they could be spoken. I'd felt that kind of quiet before in towns where fear had put down roots. A few people moved along the boardwalk. They walked with their heads down, shoulders hunched, like they were expecting rain, even though the sky was clear. Nobody met my eyes as I rode past. That was the second thing I noticed. In most frontier towns, a stranger draws attention. Folks want to know who you are, what you want, whether you're bringing trouble or trade. But here people looked through me like I was already a ghost. I tied my horse outside the boarding house and stood there a moment, feeling the town breathe around me. The wind carried the smell of dust and horses, and something else, something old and burned that made me think of autumn fires. A woman came out of the general store across the street. She was maybe 50, wearing black from neck to boots. A widow, I figured. The war had made plenty of those. She carried a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. She walked careful, like the ground might give way beneath her feet. I touched my hat. "Ma'am?" She stopped. Her eyes flicked to my face, then away. For a moment I thought she'd keep walking, but then something shifted in her expression, a decision made. "You're a preacher," she said. Not a question. "I am." "You planning to stay?" "Thought I'd preach Sunday if the church will have me." She looked at me, then really looked. Her eyes were gray as winter sky, and they'd seen things I couldn't imagine. "The church will have you," she said. "Whether you should stay is another question." "I don't follow, ma'am." She glanced down the street toward the sheriff's office. When she looked back, her voice was lower. "There's things happening in this town that ain't right. Things the law don't touch because the law's part of it." "What kind of things?" She shifted the bundle in her arms. "The kind a preacher might want to pray on before getting involved in." "I appreciate the warning." "Clara," she said. "Clara Brennan. Reverend Samuel Thorne." She nodded like she'd expected as much. "You look like a man who's seen his share of trouble, Reverend Thorne. But what's coming tomorrow?" She stopped herself. shook her head. I shouldn't have said anything. What's coming tomorrow, Mrs. Brennan? For a long moment she was silent. The wind picked up, rattling the dry leaves that had collected in the corners of the boardwalk. Somewhere down the street a dog barked once and went quiet. An auction, she said finally. Nothing unusual about an auction. This one is. I waited. She looked at me like she was weighing something, like she was deciding whether I was the kind of man who could hear truth and not turn away from it. They're selling people, Reverend. Not cattle, not horses. People. The words hung in the air between us. The war's over. I said, though, even as I spoke I knew how foolish it sounded. The war ended, Clara Brennan said. Slavery didn't. Not everywhere. Not for everyone. She started to walk away, then stopped. It happens in a barn 3 miles north of here. Tomorrow at dawn. If you're the praying kind, pray for the souls being sold. And pray for your own if you decide to witness it. Then she was gone, disappearing into her house with a door that closed soft as a whisper. I stood there in the fading light, listening to the town's silence. I should have mounted my horse and ridden out that very minute. But I've never been good at walking away from something that needs witnessing. I took a room at the boarding house. The woman who ran it was thin as a fence post and just as welcoming. She took my coin without comment and pointed me toward a room at the end of the hall. The room was clean enough, a narrow bed, a washstand, a chair by the window. I set my saddlebag down and stood at the window looking out at the street below. The sun was setting now, painting the buildings in shades of rust and gold. Beautiful light if you didn't look too close at what it was illuminating. I watched people move through their evening routines. A man sweeping the boardwalk in front of the general store, 2 boys chasing a hoop down the street, a woman carrying water from the town pump. Normal life on the surface. But I'd learned long ago that surfaces lie. I thought about what Clara Brennan had said. An auction. People being sold. 4 years after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, 5 years after the war ended, and still this darkness persisted in hidden places. I'd heard rumors, of course. Every traveling preacher heard things. Whispers of labor camps where men worked for no wages. Stories of debt bondage that looked suspiciously like slavery with a new name. Tales of auctions held in secret where desperate people were sold to pay debts or punish crimes real or imagined. But hearing rumors and witnessing truth are different animals. I sat in that chair as night fell, watching the street empty. One by one, lights appeared in windows. The saloon stayed bright and loud. The church stayed dark. That told me what I needed to know about this town's priorities. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall. They stopped outside my door. I waited, but whoever it was moved on without knocking. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Clara Brennan's face, heard her words. Pray for the souls being sold. When the first light of dawn touched the window, I was already dressed. I didn't know what I'd see when I rode north to that barn. Didn't know if I'd have the stomach to witness it or the courage to speak against it. But I knew I had to go, because that's the thing about being called to witness. It's not always comfortable. It's not always safe. But if good people turn away from evil because it's easier not to see, then evil wins by default. I'd spent 40 years preaching about light and darkness. Time to find out if my faith meant anything when the darkness was real. The town was just stirring when I led my horse out of the stable. A few early risers moved through the gray dawn light. They didn't look at me, and I didn't press them. I rode slow through the main street, giving people time to see me, giving myself time to decide if I really meant to do this. At the northern edge of town, I stopped at the general store. It was just opening. The same man I'd seen sweeping the night before was unlocking the door. "Morning," I said. He grunted something that might have been a greeting. "I'm looking for directions," I said. "Here there's a barn a few miles north." His hand froze on the door handle. He looked at me, then really looked. "You don't want to go there, mister." "Reverend," I said. "And maybe I don't. But I'm going anyway." He studied my face. Whatever he saw there made him sigh. 3 miles north. Follow the main road till you see a lightning-struck oak on the left. Path runs east from there through the scrub. Barn's about a quarter-mile in." "Much obliged." He opened the door, then turned back. "Reverend." "Yes." "You can't stop it. Nobody can. Best you can do is pray for them after." "Why can't it be stopped?" He looked down the street toward the sheriff's office. "Because the law's the one running it," he said. Then he went inside and closed the door. I sat on my horse watching the sky lighten, thinking about what I'd just heard. The law was running it, which meant this wasn't some outlaws operating in the shadows. This was sanctioned, official, protected. In that moment, I had a choice. I could ride back to the boarding house, pack my things, and leave this town to its sins. I could preach my Sunday sermon somewhere else in a place where the congregation didn't have blood on its hands. Or I could ride north. I rode north. The lightning-struck oak was right where the storekeeper said it would be. A massive tree split down the middle, dead on one side and stubbornly alive on the other. A good metaphor for the whole country in those days, half dead from war, half alive and fighting to stay that way. The path east was narrow, barely more than a wagon track through dry grass and scrub brush. My horse didn't like it. He kept tossing his head ears flat. Animals know things we don't. They can smell fear and violence the way we smell rain coming. I let him pick his way careful. No hurry. Whatever was waiting in that barn would wait. The sun was up now, but it hadn't burned off the morning chill. My breath came out in small clouds. The only sound was the creak of my saddle and the soft thud of hooves on packed earth. Then I heard voices. They drifted through the scrub, muted but distinct. Men's voices, mostly rough and casual. The kind of talk that happens when people gather for business. I came around a bend, and there it was. The barn. It was bigger than I expected. A weathered structure that might have held hay and livestock once before it became something else. Before it became a place where human beings were traded like commodities. Wagons were parked around it, maybe a dozen. Some fancy, some plain. Rich men and poor men both, I figured. Evil don't discriminate by class. Men stood in clusters, smoking and talking. They looked normal. That was the thing that struck me hardest. They looked like men you'd pass on any street in any town. Farmers and merchants and maybe a lawyer or two. Not monsters. Just men who'd made peace with monstrous things. I dismounted and tied my horse to a low branch. He nickered softly, unhappy. "I know," I told him. "I don't like it either." I walked toward the barn. A few men glanced at me, taking in my plain clothes and the worn Bible I carried. They dismissed me quick. A preacher was no threat, just another witness to their commerce. The barn doors were open. Inside I could see shadows moving, hear the murmur of more voices, and underneath that a sound that made my stomach turn. Chains, the soft clink of metal on metal, the sound of people bound. I stepped inside. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the dim light. When they did, I wished they hadn't. The barn had been arranged like a theater. Bales of hay formed rough seating on three sides. In the center, a wooden platform stood elevated about 3 feet off the ground. A man stood on it, thumbs hooked in his vest pockets, grinning like he was about to sell prize livestock. The auctioneer. And to the side in the shadows I saw them, the people being sold. There were maybe 8 or 10. Men mostly, but a few women. One elderly couple clinging to each other. All of them had their hands bound. All of them wore the same expression, a kind of emptiness, like they'd gone somewhere deep inside themselves, where the world couldn't reach. I'd seen that look before, on soldiers after battle, on refugees fleeing burned homes. It's the look of people who've survived so much that survival itself has become a kind of dying. I found a spot near the back and sat down on a hay bale. My hands were shaking, so I folded them around my Bible and prayed for them to steady. Clara Brennan had been right to warn me. Some things, once you've witnessed them, you can never unsee. The barn filled up as the sun climbed higher. Maybe 40-50 men total. They settled onto the hay bales, talking and laughing like they were at a horse auction or a county fair. I recognized a few faces from town. The man who ran the boarding house. A shopkeeper I'd passed on the street. Normal men doing monstrous business. At the front of the crowd I saw a man in a fine coat and a badge on his chest. The sheriff. He was maybe 50 with silver hair and a face that looked like it smiled easy, the kind of face that made you want to trust him. That's what made him dangerous. He was talking to two younger men deputies maybe, and they were laughing at something he'd said, having a grand time. My stomach twisted. Clara had been right. The law was running this. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice cut through the chatter. "Let's get started. You all know the rules. Cash only, no returns. And what happens in this barn stays in this barn." A few men chuckled at that, like it was all just good fun. The auctioneer gestured, and one of his helpers brought the first person onto the platform, a young man maybe 20 with a scar across his cheek and eyes that stared at nothing. "Strong back," the auctioneer called out. "Good for field work. Been working the Johnson place till his debt came due. Starting bid $10. Hands went up. I won't describe what happened next in detail. I won't give you the particulars of how men were sold like cattle, how their bodies were examined, how their worth was measured in dollars, and their humanity reduced to labor potential. Some things shouldn't be put into words. Some evil is bad enough without making a story of it. I will say this. I sat there and watched, and I did nothing to stop it. I told myself I was witnessing bearing testimony. But the truth is I was afraid. Afraid of the sheriff and his deputies. Afraid of being the one man who spoke up against 40. Cowardice has many faces. Sometimes it wears the face of prudence. 3 people were sold before she was brought out. I didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story, but the moment I saw her, something in my chest went tight. She was young, 17, maybe 18, thin as a willow branch with dark hair that hung in tangles over her face. Her dress was little more than rags, torn at the shoulders, stained with dirt and old blood. But it was her face that stopped me. Not because she was beautiful, though she might have been under better circumstances, but because there was nothing in her eyes. No fear, no hope, no anger, just a kind of vast emptiness, like she'd looked into the darkness so long that the darkness had moved inside her. The auctioneer grabbed her arm and pulled her to the center of the platform. "This one's a piece of work," he said, grinning. "Name's Lena Cartwright, 17 years old, no husband, no family. Been sold 3 times already." 3 times. I thought about what that meant. 3 times bought, 3 times discarded, 3 times used and found wanting. "She don't talk much," the auctioneer continued. "Don't work much either. Good for nothing far as I can tell. But maybe one of you gentlemen can find a use for her." The way he said it made my skin crawl. A few men in the crowd laughed. They knew exactly what use he was implying. "Starting bid $5, the auctioneer called. Silence. Nobody raised a hand. Nobody even looked interested. "Come on, gentlemen, $5. That's cheaper than a decent horse." Still nothing. Lena stood there staring at the ground. She didn't react to the auctioneer's words, didn't flinch when he grabbed her chin and turned her face to show the crowd. $4, the auctioneer tried. $4 for a young girl. She'll learn, she'll work. A man in the front row spat into the dirt. Not worth a single dime. The auctioneer's smile faltered. He didn't like being made to look bad. He was losing control of the crowd, and everyone could feel it. $3, he said, and now there was an edge in his voice. "Come on, somebody." The silence stretched out, uncomfortable now. Even in a place like this, there were rules. There was a rhythm. And this girl was breaking it by being so completely worthless in their eyes that nobody wanted her. I looked at her standing there, and I thought about what would happen if nobody bid. Would they keep her, sell her to someone later? Or would they decide she was too much trouble and dispose of her some other way? I've heard stories about what happens to people nobody wants. The auctioneer was getting angry now, his face flushed red. $2. Somebody give me $2 for this girl or I'm moving on. And then from the back of the barn, a voice, deep, quiet, steady. "I'll pay 20. Every head turned. I turned too, looking toward the voice. A man stood at the back of the barn, half in shadow. I hadn't seen him come in, hadn't heard him. But there he was, like he'd been there all along, waiting. He was older, 55, maybe 60. Tall, but bent a little, like he carried weight on his shoulders that nobody else could see. He wore a faded brown coat and a hat pulled low over his eyes. His face was weathered, lined deep with years and something harder than years. Sorrow, maybe, or guilt. The auctioneer blinked. $20, did you say 20? I did. The crowd murmured. $20 was more than most of the other people had sold for. It was a fortune for a girl who couldn't work, who wouldn't talk, who'd been rejected 3 times already. You sure about that, mister? The auctioneer asked. The man stepped forward out of the shadows. He reached into his coat and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills. His hands, I noticed, were shaking just a little. I'm sure, he said. The auctioneer shrugged. He didn't care why. Money was money. Sold. The gavel came down. $20 to the gentleman in the back. The man walked forward through the crowd. Men stepped aside to let him pass. Some looked at him curious. Some looked at him like they knew something the rest of us didn't. He climbed onto the platform and approached the girl. She didn't move, didn't look up, just stood there like a statue waiting for whatever came next. The man reached out slowly, carefully, like you'd approach a wounded animal. He took off his hat. That's when I saw his face clearly for the first time. It was a hard face, a face that had seen violence and loss. But there was something else in it too, something that made me lean forward, watching close. When he looked at the girl, his expression changed. Softened maybe, or broke just a little. And then I saw it. His eyes dropped to her wrist, to the place where her sleeve had torn, exposing her skin. There was a scar there, a small crescent moon shape, old and faded. The man stared at it like he'd seen a ghost. His breath caught. His hand reached out, then stopped, hovering in the air. The girl looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes met his. Green eyes, I saw, the color of new leaves in spring, beautiful eyes in a face that had forgotten how to feel. The man's lips moved. He whispered something so quiet I couldn't hear it. But I saw the word form on his lips. Lena. Her name. He knew her name. The girl's expression didn't change. If she recognized him, she didn't show it. She just looked at him with those empty green eyes, waiting. The auctioneer cleared his throat. You need help getting her to your wagon, mister. The man shook his head. He was still staring at the girl, at the scar on her wrist. Finally, he seemed to remember where he was, what this was. He pulled his eyes away from her and turned to the auctioneer. I need to pay. That you do. The man counted out $20 in worn bills. His hands were steadier now, like he'd made some kind of decision, and it had calmed him. The auctioneer took the money, counted it twice, and nodded. She's yours. Fair and legal. The man turned back to the girl. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. Your hands, he said softly. She held them out, wrists together. The chains binding them were rusty old. He fitted the key to the lock and turned it. The chains fell away with a sound like breaking glass. The girl looked at her free hands like she didn't recognize them. Come on, the man said. Let's go. He started to walk toward the barn door. After a moment, the girl followed. She moved like someone in a dream, one foot in front of the other, mechanical. I watched them go. The man who'd paid $20 for a girl nobody wanted. The girl with the scar on her wrist and nothing in her eyes. And I thought, there's a story here. I didn't know what it was yet. Didn't know how it would end. But I knew I couldn't walk away from it. Outside, the man led the girl toward a wagon at the edge of the clearing. An old wagon, weathered gray, pulled by 2 horses that looked as tired as their owner. He helped her up into the seat. Gentle, careful, like she might break. She sat there, hands in her lap, staring at nothing. The man climbed up beside her. He picked up the reins, then paused. He turned and looked back at the barn. I was standing in the doorway, watching. Our eyes met. For a long moment we just looked at each other. 2 men, strangers, connected by the accident of witnessing the same terrible thing. Then he nodded. Once. Slow. I nodded back. He turned away and snapped the reins. The wagon pulled forward, wheels creaking. The girl sat beside him, silent and still. I watched them disappear down the path heading south. Back toward town, maybe, or beyond it. I couldn't tell. Behind me, the auction continued. Another person was brought to the platform, another life reduced to dollars and deals. But I couldn't watch anymore. I walked to my horse and mounted up. My hands were shaking again. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed stones. Clara Brennan had warned me, told me to pray for the souls being sold. I'd witnessed what she meant me to see, borne testimony to evil done in the light of day. But I knew even then that witnessing wasn't enough. Testimony without action is just another form of silence. I thought about the man who'd paid $20, about the way he'd looked at that scar on the girl's wrist, about the word I'd seen on his lips, Lena. He knew her from somewhere sometime before this, before the auction, before the chains. And something about that scar had broken his heart. I wanted to know why, needed to know. So instead of riding back to town, I turned my horse south, following at a distance, staying far enough back that they wouldn't see me, close enough that I wouldn't lose them. I told myself I was just making sure the girl was safe, that the man who'd bought her didn't have evil intentions. But the truth was simpler than that. I'd spent 40 years preaching about redemption and forgiveness and the possibility of grace in a fallen world. And I had a feeling, just a feeling, but a strong one, that I was about to see what those words actually meant when they stopped being theology and became life. The wagon moved slow through the morning sun. The girl sat silent beside the man who'd bought her freedom, and I followed, keeping my distance, bearing witness to whatever came next. I kept my distance. The wagon moved slow through the scrub country wheels, finding every rut in the path. The man drove careful, like he was carrying something precious that might break. Maybe he was. I stayed back far enough that the dust from my horse wouldn't reach them, close enough to see the girl's profile, the way she sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. She hadn't spoken, hadn't moved except when the wagon jolted over rough ground, just sat there like a carved figure staring at nothing. The man didn't try to talk to her. He kept his eyes on the road reins loose in his hands. But every few minutes I saw him glance sideways, checking on her maybe, or trying to find words that wouldn't come. The land stretched flat and empty around us, scrub grass and mesquite. A hawk circled high overhead, riding the thermals. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the morning chill. I'd been riding these territories long enough to read landscape. This was hard country, the kind that broke people who weren't strong enough to bend with it. Drought country, where water meant life and the lack of it meant slow death. We rode for maybe an hour before the man pulled the wagon to a stop. I reined in my horse, watching from behind a stand of mesquite. The man climbed down from the wagon. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small. A key, I thought, the same one he'd used on her chains. He walked to the back of the wagon and opened a lockbox. When he returned to the girl's side, he was holding a canteen and what looked like a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. "Here," he said, his voice carried across the still air. "You must be thirsty." The girl didn't move. "Please," he said, "you need water." Still nothing. He stood there, canteen in hand, and for a moment I saw something cross his face. Not anger, not impatience, something closer to grief. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know you don't believe that. I know you got no reason to trust me or any man. But I'm telling you true. I didn't buy you to own you." The girl's head turned, slowly, like it took effort. She looked at him, really looked, maybe for the first time since the auction, and then she spoke. "You paid for me," she said. Her voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in a long time. "Now do it." The words hit like stones thrown hard, blunt, challenging, not a plea, not surrender, a dare. "Do what you paid for. Show me what kind of man you are." I saw the man flinch, saw the canteen shake in his hand. "No," he said. His voice was steady, but barely. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there looking at this girl who'd been sold 3 times before and was daring him to be the 4th monster in a line of monsters. Finally, he set the canteen and bread on the wagon seat beside her. "It's water," he said, "and food. Nothing more, nothing less." He walked away from the wagon, put maybe 20 feet between them. Then he turned and stood with his back to her, giving her space, giving her the illusion of privacy at least. I watched the girl, saw her look at the canteen, at the bread, at the man's back, saw her calculate, weighing hunger and thirst against whatever trap she thought this might be. She reached for the canteen. Her hand trembled. She took one sip. Just one. Like she was testing for poison. When nothing happened, she drank longer. 3, 4 swallows. Then she set it down and picked up the bread. She ate it in small bites, watching the man the whole time, watching for the moment he'd turn around and demand payment for his kindness. He didn't turn around. He just stood there looking out at the empty land. When she finished eating, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Why?" she asked. The man was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because nobody should go hungry if I can help it." "That's not what I'm asking." "I know." "Then answer." He turned around then, looked at her straight. "I knew your family," he said. I saw the girl go very still. "You're lying." "No, ma'am." "Don't call me that." "What should I call you?" "Nothing. I'm nobody." That's what the man at the auction said. The man shook his head. "Your name is Lena Cartwright. Your father was Robert Cartwright. Your mother was Mary. You had a brother named Thomas, and he could whistle any bird call you named." The girl, Lena, stared at him. Her face had gone white. "How do you know that—" "I told you. I knew your family." "They're dead." "I know. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring them back." "No, it doesn't." Lena looked at him with those empty green eyes. "Who are you?" "My name's Grant McCabe." I saw recognition flicker across her face. Just for a second. Then it was gone, buried under that careful blankness. But she'd known the name. I was sure of it. "I don't remember you," she said. Grant McCabe nodded. "It's been a long time. You were just a child." "I'm still nobody." "You're somebody to me." "Why?" "Because you feel guilty. Because you think buying me makes you some kind of savior." Grant McCabe flinched again. Every word she spoke hit him like a physical blow. "No," he said. "I don't think that." "Then what?" He was quiet for a long time. The sun beat down. A dust devil spun across the road and dissolved into nothing. "I think I owe your family a debt I can never repay," he said finally. "But I'm going to try anyway." Lena laughed. It was a harsh sound, bitter as alkali water. "You want to pay a debt? Then let me go. Right here. Right now." Grant McCabe looked at her. "Where would you go?" "Anywhere. Nowhere. What does it matter?" "It matters because there's men out there who'd do worse than what you're afraid I'll do. At least at my place you'll have food, shelter, a bed that's yours alone." "Nothing's mine alone. Not anymore." "It will be. I'm giving you my word." "Words don't mean much." "I know. That's why I'll show you with actions." Lena stared at him. I could see her thinking. Calculating odds. She'd survived this long by being smart, by reading men and situations. She was reading him now. "You'll try to use me," she said. "Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually." "No. All men do. Not this man." She studied his face, looking for the lie, the crack in the facade. Whatever she saw there, it didn't satisfy her. But it didn't damn him either. "How far to your place?" she asked. "Another hour." She nodded, picked up the canteen and took another drink. When she was done, she looked at him. "I'll come," she said. "But the first time you touch me wrong, I'll kill you. I don't care what happens to me after." Grant McCabe nodded slowly. "That's fair." He climbed back onto the wagon. She moved slightly away from him, pressing against the far side of the seat, keeping distance between them. He snapped the reins. The wagon rolled forward, and I followed this man and this girl who'd made some kind of wary truce built on water and bread and words that might or might not be true. We reached the ranch just past noon. It wasn't much. A small cabin weathered gray with a porch that sagged on one end, a barn that looked like it was held together by hope and habit, a corral with a few horses, some chickens scratching in the dirt, the kind of place a man scrapes by on, not prosperous, not poor, just existing day by day. Grant pulled the wagon up near the cabin. He climbed down and tied the horses. Lena sat in the wagon looking at the place. Her face showed nothing. "This is it," Grant said. "Not much I know, but it's safe." Lena climbed down on her own. Didn't wait for help. She stood in the dust, arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. Grant opened the cabin door. "Inside," he said. "I'll show you." She hesitated. That moment before stepping across a threshold. The moment when you commit to whatever's on the other side. She stepped inside. I dismounted and tied my horse to a tree about 100 yards away. From there I could see the cabin but wasn't obvious. I told myself I was being cautious, protective. Truth was I was being nosy, wanted to see how this played out. Grant showed Lena the cabin. It was small. One main room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, a washstand, some shelves with supplies. "You'll sleep here," Grant said, gesturing to the bed. "I'll sleep in the barn." Lena looked at the bed, then at him. "Why?" "Because it's yours. I told you that." "Where did you sleep before?" "Here, but I can sleep anywhere." She walked to the bed, touched the quilt folded at the foot. Her fingers traced the pattern. It was old but clean, hand-stitched. "My mother made quilts," she said. So quiet I almost didn't hear it from my spot outside. Grant's face changed, softened and broke at the same time. "I remember," he said. "She was good at it." Lena pulled her hand back like the quilt had burned her. "Don't talk about her." "All right. Don't talk about any of them." "All right." She turned to face him. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. Just for you to be safe." "Nobody does nothing for nothing." "I do." "You're lying." Grant sighed. He looked tired, old, like the weight he carried had suddenly gotten heavier. "I'm not lying," he said. "But I understand why you can't believe me. Time will show you. That's all I can offer." He walked to the door. Stopped. "There's bread in the cupboard, water in the bucket, clothes in the trunk. They were my mother's. They'll be big on you, but they're clean. You can burn that dress if you want." "Where are you going?" "Barn. Got work to do. You need anything, just call." "I won't call." "I know. But the offer stands." He left. The door closed quiet behind him. I watched Lena through the window. She stood in the center of that small room, arms still wrapped around herself. Her head turned, taking in every detail. The door, the window, the cupboard, looking for exits, for weapons, for anything she could use if this turned bad. She walked to the trunk and opened it. Inside were women's clothes, simple dresses worn but mended. She pulled one out, held it up. It was too big, like Grant had said, but it was whole, clean. She looked at the tattered dress she wore, the one she'd been sold in. She began to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears running down her face while she stood there holding a dead woman's dress. I looked away. Some grief is too private for witnessing. I made my way back to town as the sun started its descent. My horse was tired and so was I. Not from riding, from watching. There's a weight to bearing witness, a heaviness that settles in your bones. I'd seen a man buy a girl's freedom for $20. Seen him treat her with a gentleness that seemed to cost him something. Seen her armor herself against that gentleness because trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. And I'd seen her cry for the family she'd lost, for the life that had been stolen from her. I didn't know what would come of this, whether Grant McCabe's intentions were as pure as they seemed, whether Lena Cartwright would ever be able to trust anyone again. But I knew I needed to understand more. About this town. About what happened to the Cartwright family. About why a man would pay $20 for a girl everyone else thought worthless. The town was quiet when I rode in. Late afternoon quiet when people were finishing their work and thinking about supper. I returned my horse to the stable and walked to the boarding house. The woman who ran it looked up from her mending when I entered. "Thought you might have left," she said. "Not yet. You go where I think you went this morning." "I did." She shook her head. "Nothing good comes from witnessing that." "Maybe not, but somebody ought to." She went back to her mending. I went to my room. But I couldn't settle. The images from the morning kept circling through my mind. The auction, the girl, the scar on her wrist that had made Grant McCabe's face crumble. I needed to know more. So when darkness fell, I walked to Clara Brennan's house and knocked. She opened the door a crack. When she saw it was me, she sighed. "You went," she said. "I did." "I warned you." "You did." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. "Come in, Reverend. We should talk." Clara Brennan's house was small and neat. Everything in its place. The home of a woman who'd learned to control what little she could in a world that had taken much from her. She poured us both coffee. We sat at her kitchen table, and for a while neither of us spoke. Finally she said, "What did you see?" I told her. About the auction. About Lena Cartwright being sold for nothing until Grant McCabe bid $20. About the way he'd looked at her. The scar on her wrist. Clara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stared into her coffee cup. "Lena Cartwright," she said. "Lord, I thought she was dead." "You knew her. Knew her family. The Cartwrights had a farm about 5 miles from here. Good people. Robert and Mary were honest folks, hard workers. They had 2 children, Thomas and Lena." "What happened to them?" Clara's hands tightened around her cup. "The war happened, or what came after it. Tell me." She looked up at me. "You sure you want to know? Once you hear it, you can't unhear it." "I'm sure." She took a breath, let it out slow. "It was 1861, right after the war started. There was a lot of confusion in these parts, lot of fear. People taking sides, neighbors turning on neighbors. The Cartwrights, they just wanted to stay out of it, work their land, raise their kids. But they had something other people wanted." "What?" "Water. Their land sat on top of an aquifer. Best water in the county. In dry years it was the difference between surviving and dying." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Someone wanted their land. Several someones, but one man in particular, Samuel McCabe. He owned the ranch next door. Ambitious man, greedy. He wanted to control the water, and the Cartwrights were in his way. "Grant McCabe's father." Clara nodded. "You're quick, Reverend." "Yes, Grant's father." Samuel McCabe decided the Cartwrights were Confederate sympathizers, traitors to the Union. It was a lie, but it was a useful lie. What did he do? He went to the Union forces stationed nearby, told them the Cartwrights were harboring Confederate soldiers, giving them aid and comfort. None of it was true, but in those days, truth didn't matter much. Fear mattered. Power mattered. She paused, drank some coffee. Her hand shook slightly. "They came one night," she continued. "Soldiers led by a young officer looking to make a name for himself. They surrounded the Cartwright farm, demanded the family come out. And then Robert Cartwright came out with his hands up, tried to explain it was all a mistake. They didn't care. They'd been told he was a traitor, and that was enough. They beat him. Mary came running out to stop them, and they—" Her voice broke. She stopped. I waited. "They killed them both," she said finally. "Shot Robert. Mary died trying to protect him. Then they burned the house, burned the barn, burned everything. The children— Thomas tried to fight. He was just a boy, 14 years old. They shot him too. Lena was 9. Her mother hid her before coming out, told her to stay hidden no matter what. Lena watched the whole thing from where she was hiding, watched her family die, watched her home burn." I closed my eyes, felt sick. The soldiers found her eventually, Clara said. After the fire. She was in shock, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare. They didn't know what to do with her, so they put her in an orphanage, or what passed for one in those days, really just a workhouse where children were used for labor. For 8 years. At first, then she got sold out, contracted to families who needed workers. Each one treated her worse than the last, each one broke her a little more. Until Grant McCabe bought her. Clara looked at me. You see the cruelty of it, don't you? The son of the man who destroyed her family is the one who bought her. If there's a God, Reverend, he has a dark sense of irony. I sat with that, thinking about Grant's face when he'd seen the scar, about the way he'd whispered her name. He knew her, I said. Before. He recognized her. I'd imagine so. The families were neighbors. Grant would have known Lena when she was a child. There's more to it than that. The scar on her wrist, he looked at it like he knew exactly how she got it. Clara frowned. I don't know about any scar. It's there, on her left wrist, shaped like a crescent moon. She thought about it, shook her head. I don't recall that, but I didn't know the family intimately. Grant knew, and it meant something to him. Maybe. But knowing and doing something about it are different things. Where was Grant McCabe when his father was destroying that family? Where was he when those soldiers came? I don't know. Neither do I. But I'll tell you what I do know. Samuel McCabe got what he wanted. He claimed the Cartwright land after they died, said it was abandoned property, took the water rights for himself. And Grant inherited it. Clara shook her head. That's the strange part. Samuel died 5 years ago, bitter and angry from what I heard. But he didn't die owning the Cartwright land. Who owns it now? She looked at me. Sheriff Dalton Reeves. He bought it from Samuel McCabe a year before Samuel died, for a fraction of what it was worth. I felt pieces clicking together. Not a full picture yet, but the edges of something. The sheriff led the raid, didn't he? Clara nodded. He wasn't sheriff then, just a young lieutenant looking to prove himself. But yes, he led the soldiers that night. He's the one who gave the orders to burn everything. And now he owns the land he helped steal. Now he owns it, and he's made himself rich off that water. Half the farmers in this county pay him for access to it. He controls who drinks and who doesn't, who lives and who dies. I thought about the man I'd seen at the auction, silver-haired, smiling, the kind of face that made you want to trust him, a face that hid a killer. Does Lena know? I asked. About Dalton. I don't know what she knows. She was just a child when it happened. Maybe she remembers. Maybe she's blocked it all out. Trauma does strange things to memory. And Grant? Does he know about Dalton? Clara looked at me like I was being slow. Reverend Grant McCabe and Dalton Reeves grew up together. They were friends, went to war together. If anyone knows what Dalton did that night, it's Grant. I left Clara's house with my head spinning. The pieces were coming together, but they made a picture I didn't want to see. Grant McCabe's father had arranged the destruction of the Cartwright family. The sheriff, Grant's childhood friend, had led the raid. And Grant himself had been, what, complicit a witness. An innocent bystander I didn't know, but I knew he carried guilt like a man carries a physical wound, something that never quite heals. I walked through the dark streets. The town was quiet now, a few lights in windows, the saloon still loud with voices and piano music. I thought about Lena alone in that cabin, surrounded by the possessions of a dead woman, wearing clothes that belonged to Grant's mother. Did she know where she was? Did she understand that the land she was standing on had been stolen from her family? And Grant, what was he thinking right now? Was he in that barn, unable to sleep, knowing that the girl he'd bought was the daughter of people his family had destroyed? The weight of it was crushing. I could feel it, and I was just a witness. What must it feel like to carry it firsthand? I was so lost in thought that I almost didn't see the man until I nearly walked into him. "Careful there, friend." I looked up. It was the sheriff, Dalton Reeves. Up close, he was even more imposing than he'd been at the auction. Tall, broad-shouldered, that smile still on his face, but his eyes were cold. "Sheriff," I said. "Sorry. Wasn't watching where I was going. Happens to us all. You're the preacher, aren't you, new in town?" "Reverend Samuel Thorne, passing through." "Passing through?" He said it like he didn't quite believe me. "You staying for Sunday service?" "That's my plan." "Good. We could use some spiritual guidance around here." The way he said it made it clear he was mocking me, mocking the whole idea of spiritual guidance. "I do what I can," I said. He studied me. "You wouldn't have been at that barn this morning, would you?" My heart kicked against my ribs, but I kept my face calm. "I was." "Thought so. I remember faces. You were sitting in the back. Looked mighty uncomfortable." "It was uncomfortable." He laughed. "I suppose it would be for a man of God. But it's legal, you understand. All above board. These are debtor sales, people who owe what they can't pay. It's a kindness, really, giving them a chance to work off their obligations." "That's one way to see it." "It's the only way to see it. The war's over, Reverend. Slavery's done. This is just commerce, supply and demand. And the girl who was sold Lena Cartwright, what did she owe?" Something flickered in Dalton's eyes, just for a second. Then it was gone. "You asking about her specifically?" "Just curious." "Curiosity can be dangerous." "So I've heard." We stood there, two men sizing each other up in the darkness. I could feel the threat coming off him like heat. "The Cartwright girl," he said slowly, "is nobody's concern. She's been sold. That's the end of it." "To Grant McCabe." Dalton's smile faded. "You know Grant?" "Met him this morning. Seemed like a decent man." "Grant's a lot of things. Decent's one of them, I suppose. Also foolish. Also burdened by a conscience that won't let him rest." "You know him well." "Better than most. We go back a long way, Grant and I. Fought in the war together. Survived things that would have killed lesser men." "Must make you good friends." Dalton's smile came back, but it was colder now. "We were brothers once," he said. "Now we're just two men who remember when we were younger. Happens to everyone, doesn't it? You grow up, you grow apart. You learn that the people you thought you knew are strangers after all." He tipped his hat. "Good evening, Reverend. Enjoy your stay in our town. But don't stay too long. Strangers who ask too many questions tend to find answers they don't like." He walked away, boots echoing on the wooden boardwalk. I stood there breathing hard, feeling like I'd just had a knife pressed to my throat without seeing the blade. Dalton Reeves knew I'd been asking questions, knew I'd connected Lena to Grant, and he wanted me to know that he knew. It was a warning. Quiet, polite, but clear as Sunday morning. I walked back to the boarding house, locked my door, sat on the bed, and I thought, this is going to get worse before it gets better. The next morning I rode out to Grant's ranch. I told myself I was just checking on the girl, making sure she was safe. But truth was, I needed to talk to Grant, needed to understand what he was doing and why. The ranch looked the same as it had the day before, quiet, worn, a place where a man lived but didn't thrive. I tied my horse and walked toward the cabin. Before I could knock, the door opened. Lena stood there. She'd changed clothes, wore one of the dresses from the trunk. It was too big, like Grant had said, but she'd belted it with rope to make it fit. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was clean. She looked different, still wary, still guarded, but not quite as empty as before. "You're the preacher," she said. "Reverend Thorne. I was at the auction." "I remember. I wanted to see how you were settling in." She looked at me, through me maybe. "Why?" "Because I care what happens to you." "You don't know me." "Doesn't mean I can't care." She studied my face, looking for the angle, the hidden motive. "Grant's in the barn," she said finally, "if you want to talk to him." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you." That surprised her. Why? Because you're the one who matters here, not him. She blinked, like nobody had said something like that to her in a long time, maybe ever. Come in, she said. I followed her into the cabin. It was tidy. The bed was made. The dishes were washed. She'd been working. She sat at the table, gestured for me to sit across from her. He hasn't touched me, she said, like she needed to establish that first. He sleeps in the barn, gives me the cabin, brings me food, doesn't ask for anything. Do you believe that will last? No, but I'm grateful for it while it does. What will you do if it doesn't? She reached under the table. When her hand came back up, it was holding a knife, not a large one, a paring knife from the kitchen, but in the right hands it would do. This, she said. I nodded. Smart. She seemed surprised that I approved. You're not going to tell me to trust in God's plan. God's plan and human evil aren't mutually exclusive. You do what you need to survive. She set the knife on the table. You're different from other preachers I've met. I've seen too much to preach pretty lies. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside I could hear chickens clucking, the wind moving through dry grass. Do you remember your family? I asked. Her face changed, closed off. Don't. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said don't. Her voice was sharp, final. I raised my hands. All right, I'm sorry. She looked at the knife, at her hands, at anything but me. I remember some things, she said quietly. Not everything. Some days I can't picture my mother's face. That's the worst part, knowing I'm forgetting them. That's not your fault. Feels like it is. Memory's a strange thing. It protects us sometimes by letting us forget, but that doesn't mean the love was any less real. She looked up at me then. Her eyes were wet. Grant says he knew them. My family. He did. The families were neighbors. He knew them and did nothing when they died. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I don't know what he did or didn't do, but I know he carries it like a wound. Good. He should. There was anger in her voice now. Real anger, not the empty defiance from before. Anger meant she was feeling something. That was progress in its own way. What will you do? I asked. Stay here. For now, until I figure out where to go. You could go anywhere. Start fresh. She laughed. Bitter. With what I have nothing. No money. No family. No skills except surviving. Where exactly do you think I can go? She had a point. I could help, I said. Find you a position somewhere. A family that needs... No. The word was flat. Absolute. No more families. No more being sold or given or placed. I stay here because at least Grant doesn't pretend it's for my own good. I understood. She'd been passed around enough. At least here the terms were clear. If you need anything, I said, if you're in danger or need help, I won't ask for it. I know, but the offer stands. I stood to leave. She stood too. Reverend, yes. Why do you care? Really? I thought about how to answer that. How to explain that bearing witness creates obligation. That once you've seen someone's pain, you can't just walk away and pretend you didn't. Because somebody should, I said. And I'm here. She nodded slowly, like that made sense to her. Like maybe in her experience it was the most honest answer anyone had given her. I left the cabin and walked toward the barn. Grant was inside mucking out a stall. He looked up when I entered and I saw the question in his eyes. She's fine, I said. As fine as she can be. He nodded, went back to his work. I talked to Clara Brennan, I said. She told me about the Cartwrights. Grant's hands stilled. He didn't look up. Then you know. I know your father arranged it. I know Dalton led the raid. I know the family died and Lena survived. Then you know why I bought her. I know guilt when I see it. He looked up then. His face was tired, lined deep with years and sorrow. It's not just guilt, Reverend. It's debt. My family took everything from her. I can't give it back, but I can give her safety, a place to rest, a chance to figure out what comes next. Does she know about your father? Not yet, but she will. I'll tell her when the time's right. There's never a right time for that kind of truth. I know. He set down the pitchfork. But I have to try. I owe her that much. I owe her everything. You can't buy redemption, Grant. I'm not trying to buy it. I'm trying to earn it. One day at a time. I looked at this man bent under the weight of sins that weren't even his own, and I thought about grace, about whether it's possible to atone for the wrongs of fathers, about whether trying is enough. Dalton knows she's here, I said. Grant's face hardened. He was at the auction. He warned me last night, told me strangers who ask too many questions don't last long. He's right about that. Should I be worried? Grant looked at me. You should leave, Reverend. Get out of this town before Dalton decides you're a problem. What about you? What about Lena? We'll manage. Will you? Dalton's the sheriff. He has power here. I know what he is. Do you? I stepped closer. Clara said you were friends once, brothers even. What happened? Grant's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, the war happened, and we chose different sides. You both fought for the Union. I'm not talking about the war between North and South. I'm talking about the war between right and wrong, between being a man or being a monster. Dalton chose monster. I chose coward. The word hung heavy in the air. You didn't lead the raid, I said. No, but I didn't stop it either. I knew it was coming. My father told Dalton, and Dalton told me. He was proud of himself, thought he was doing important work rooting out traitors. You could have warned the Cartwrights. I tried. I rode to their farm that night, but I was too late. By the time I got there, the house was already burning. I heard the screams, I heard Lena crying, and I froze. I sat on my horse and I watched it happen. I didn't even try to help. He turned away. His shoulders shook. I was 28 years old, young enough to be brave, old enough to know better, and I did nothing. You were one man against a platoon. I could have tried. You would have died. Maybe I should have. I didn't have an answer for that. Sometimes the weight of survival is heavier than death. What happened after? I asked. I rode back home, told my father what I'd seen. He laughed, said it was necessary, said the Cartwrights got what they deserved. I left that night, took my horse and rode out, didn't speak to him again for 3 years. And Dalton, Grant's face went hard. Dalton got everything he wanted, a reputation as a tough officer, a promotion. After the war he came back here and ran for sheriff, won easy, and 5 years ago he bought the Cartwright land from my father, the land built on the bones of the people he killed. Your father sold it to him, practically gave it away. I think he knew he was dying. I think he wanted to make sure I didn't inherit it. One last act of spite. And you, what did you inherit? This, Grant gestured around the barn. A small ranch, enough to survive on, not enough to prosper, and the knowledge that my family's wealth was built on murder. We stood there in silence. Outside a crow called. The wind rattled the barn doors. What happens now? I asked. Now I keep my promise. I keep Lena safe, and I wait. Wait for what? For her to decide, stay or go, forgive or don't forgive. It's her choice, not mine. And Dalton? Grant's hand moved to his hip where a gun hung in a worn holster. Dalton's a problem, but he won't move against me openly, not yet. He knows I know too much. About the raid, about how he got that land. We're in a standoff, him and me, and as long as we both keep quiet, the peace holds. And if it doesn't hold, Grant looked at me, then one of us dies, Reverend. That's how these things end. I left the ranch that afternoon with a sick feeling in my stomach. This was bigger than I'd thought, more tangled, more dangerous. A girl who didn't know she was living on land stolen from her family, a man trying to atone for sins he didn't commit but witnessed. A sheriff who'd built his life on murder and would kill to protect it. And me, a traveling preacher who'd stumbled into the middle of it all. I should have left. Should have ridden out that very day and let these people sort out their own darkness. But I couldn't, because I'd seen Lena's face, heard Grant's confession, felt the weight of this town's secrets pressing down like a physical thing. Sometimes being called to witness means staying when it's not safe, when it's not smart, when every instinct says, run. I went back to the boarding house, sat in my room, prayed for wisdom, for courage, for the right words when the time came, and for Lena and Grant, two people trying to survive in a world that wanted them both destroyed for different reasons. As darkness fell, I heard hoofbeats outside, voices, the sound of men gathering. I went to the window and looked out. Sheriff Dalton was in the street with 3 deputies. They were armed, ready for something. Clara Brennan was there too, watching from her porch. When she saw me in the window, she shook her head. A warning. Dalton looked up, saw me, smiled. Then he mounted his horse and rode north, toward Grant's ranch. My heart kicked hard. I grabbed my coat and ran for the stairs. By the time I got my horse and followed, they had a good lead. I pushed hard, riding faster than was safe in the dark. The moon was up, giving just enough light to see the road. I didn't know what Dalton planned to do, but I knew it wouldn't be good. The miles stretched out. My horse was lathered and blowing hard by the time I saw lights ahead. Grant's ranch. I slowed, approaching careful. Dalton and his men were already there, horses tied to the fence. I could hear voices. I dismounted and moved closer, staying in the shadows. The cabin door was open. Light spilled out. I could see shapes inside. Grant stood in the doorway, blocking it. Behind him I caught a glimpse of Lena. Dalton sat on his horse, relaxed, smiling. "Grant," he said, voice friendly, too friendly. "Been a while." "Dalton, heard you made a purchase yesterday. Wanted to come see for myself." "Nothing to see, just a girl who needed a place to stay." "That right?" Dalton's eyes moved past Grant to where Lena stood in the shadows. "Mind if I take a look?" "Yes, I mind." Dalton's smile faded. "Now, Grant, no need to be unfriendly. I'm the law here. Got a right to check on the welfare of citizens." "She's fine. Let me hear that from her." Grant didn't move. "You're not welcome here, Dalton." For a long moment they stared at each other. The deputies shifted hands, moving toward their guns. Then Dalton laughed. Easy. Like this was all just good fun between old friends. "All right, Grant, have it your way. But I'll be keeping an eye on you, both of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A single bullet. He tossed it and it landed on the fence post between them. "A reminder," he said softly. "Some ghosts don't stay buried." He turned his horse. His deputies followed. They rode off into the night, leaving that bullet gleaming in the moonlight. I watched Grant, saw him stand there rigid until the hoofbeats faded. Then he picked up the bullet, looked at it. His hand was shaking. Lena appeared beside him. "What does he want?" "Nothing good." "Who is he?" Grant turned to her, and I saw in that moment that he was going to tell her, going to give her the truth she deserved even if it destroyed him. "His name is Dalton Reeves," Grant said. "He's the sheriff, and 8 years ago he led the soldiers who killed your family." Lena went very still. "And you knew," she said, voice flat, dead. "Yes." "You knew him. You knew what he did." "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." "I was going to, I swear. I just—" She stepped back, away from him. Her face had gone white. "Get away from me." "Lena, I said get away." She turned and ran. Not into the cabin, into the darkness. Running blind, stumbling, desperate to get away from the man who'd just shattered what little trust she'd built. Grant started after her, then stopped. Knew it was useless. Knew she needed space. He stood there, the bullet in his hand, watching her disappear into the night. And I stepped out of the shadows. "Reverend," he said. Not surprised, like he'd known I was there all along. "She needs time," I said. "I know." "Will she come back?" "I don't know." We stood there, two men, watching the darkness where Lena had vanished. And I thought, this is how it starts. How the past comes for you, not all at once, but in pieces. A visit, a bullet, a truth that can't be unsaid. The night was cold. The wind was rising. Somewhere in the distance I heard a coyote howl, and closer, much closer, I heard something that might have been crying or might have been the wind. But I knew it wasn't the wind. Lena came back an hour before dawn. I'd stayed at the ranch that night. Grant hadn't asked me to, but he hadn't asked me to leave either. We'd sat on his porch in silence, watching the darkness, listening for footsteps that didn't come. Around midnight, Grant had finally spoken. "She's survived worse than this." "Doesn't make it easier," I'd said. "No, it doesn't." He'd gone to the barn after that. I'd stayed on the porch, wrapped in a blanket Grant had given me, dozing in fits and starts. When I heard the footsteps soft on packed earth, I was awake in an instant. She came out of the darkness like a ghost. Her dress was torn at the hem, her hair was wild, her hands were scratched and bleeding from scrambling through brush. But she was walking steady, head up, eyes clear. She saw me on the porch and stopped. "Where is he?" she asked. "Barn." She nodded, started to walk past me. "Lena," I said. She stopped, didn't turn around. "You don't have to stay here. I can help you find somewhere else, somewhere safe." "There's nowhere safe." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "Everywhere I've been, someone owns me or wants to. At least here I know what I'm dealing with." "Do you?" She turned then, looked at me. "Grant McCabe's father helped kill my family. The sheriff who did it is Grant's old friend, and I'm standing on land that was stolen from my parents. Does that about sum it up?" "Yes." "Then I know exactly what I'm dealing with." "And you're staying anyway?" She smiled. It was a hard smile, cold. "I'm staying because I want answers. Because I want to understand how my family died and who profited from it. And because—" She paused. "Because for the first time in 8 years, I'm not someone's property. I'm choosing. Even if it's a bad choice, it's mine." She walked toward the barn. I sat there thinking about what she'd said, about agency and choice, about how sometimes the illusion of control is all we have and we cling to it even when the smart thing would be to run. Voices drifted from the barn, too low for me to make out words, but I heard the tone, Lena's voice sharp and demanding, Grant's quiet and steady. They talked for a long time. When Lena came back out, the sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky. She walked past me again into the cabin and closed the door. Grant emerged a few minutes later. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "She's staying," he said. "I know. She wants the truth, all of it. Every detail about what happened that night, about my father, about Dalton, about the land. Will you give it to her?" "I don't have a choice. She deserves it." He sat down on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "She asked me why I bought her," he said. "I told her it was because I recognized the scar, because I remembered the night she got it." "How did she get it?" Grant looked up. His eyes were red. "She was 7 years old. Fell out of a tree on my father's property. Cut her wrist on a broken branch. I was riding by, heard her crying. I got her down, wrapped the wound with my bandana. She asked me if it would leave a mark. I told her no." "You lied." "I lied. Because she was a child and she was scared and I wanted to make her feel better. And now 10 years later that scar is all she has left of the girl she used to be. Everything else was taken from her." The sun broke over the horizon. Golden light spilled across the dry land. "What happens now?" I asked. Grant stood up, looked at the cabin door. "Now I tell her everything. And then I let her decide what comes next." I left the ranch that morning with a feeling of dread settling in my gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Dalton's visit, that bullet on the fence post, it was a warning, a promise that he'd be back. And when he came back, he wouldn't be smiling. I rode into town as the sun climbed higher. The main street was already busy with the morning routine, people moving between the general store and the boarding house, the blacksmith's hammer ringing, normal life on the surface. but I could feel the tension underneath, the way people's eyes cut away when they saw me, the way conversations stopped when I passed. News travels fast in small towns. People knew I'd been asking questions, knew I'd been to Grant's ranch, knew I was getting involved in something that wasn't my business. I tied my horse outside the general store and went inside. The storekeeper, the same man who'd given me directions to the auction barn, looked up from his ledger. His expression was carefully neutral. "Reverend?" "Morning. I need some supplies." "What kind?" "Coffee, beans, salt pork, whatever you can spare." He started gathering items from the shelves, worked in silence for a while, then without looking at me, "Heard you were out at the McCabe place last night." "News travels." "It does. Heard Dalton paid a visit too." "He did." The storekeeper set a bag of coffee on the counter. "You got business with Grant McCabe?" "Just checking on the girl, making sure she's all right." "The Cartwright girl." He said it quiet, like the name itself was dangerous. "You knew the family?" He nodded slowly. "Good people. Robert Cartwright was honest, fair in his dealings. Didn't deserve what happened to him." "No one does." "No." He wrapped the salt pork in brown paper. "But some people bring trouble on themselves by standing in the wrong man's way. Robert had what Samuel McCabe wanted. That's all it took." "And Dalton—" The storekeeper's hands stilled. He looked at me directly for the first time. "Dalton was a young man looking to make a name. War gave him a chance to do that. He took it. Took it too far, some would say. But who's going to argue with a man wearing a badge and backed by the law? Someone should. Should doesn't mean will, Reverend. People in this town, they got families, got businesses, got lives they want to keep living. Standing up to Dalton means risking all of that. So everyone just looks the other way." He finished wrapping the supplies, pushed them across the counter. "Everyone except fools and heroes, and in my experience there's not much difference between the two." I paid him, started to leave. He called after me. "Reverend." I turned. "That girl Lena. She's got a legal claim to that land Dalton's sitting on. If she knew, if she pushed it, things could get real complicated real fast." "Does she know?" "I don't know what she knows, but I know what Dalton would do if he thought she was a threat to his water empire, so maybe some things are better left buried. Or maybe they need to be dug up." He shook his head. "Then you are a fool. God help you." I spent the next few days moving between the town and Grant's ranch, watching, listening, bearing witness to what was building. At the ranch I saw Lena and Grant settle into a wary routine. She worked feeding chickens, hauling water, mending fence. He worked tending horses, repairing the barn, trying to stay out of her way. They barely spoke, but there was a kind of understanding forming. Not trust exactly, more like a mutual recognition that they were both trapped in the same web, spun by people long dead or too powerful to challenge. Lena asked questions, lots of them. She wanted to know everything about her family, what they were like, what they did, how they died. Grant answered every question, no matter how much it hurt him to say the words. I heard him tell her about her father's laugh, her mother's kindness, her brother's skill with horses. And I watched Lena's face as she listened, watched her try to match these stories with the fragments of memory she still carried, watched her grieve for people she'd almost forgotten. One afternoon I found her sitting on the porch holding that pocket watch, the one her father had given her the night he died. "I used to wind it every day," she said, not looking at me. "Even when I had no reason to know what time it was, even when time didn't matter because every day was the same, I wound it because it was his, because it was all I had. It's a good memory to keep." "Is it?" "Sometimes I think it would be easier to forget, to let them go completely. Instead of carrying them around like ghosts, I can't see clearly enough to mourn properly." "Memory's a burden and a gift," I said. "You get to choose which one it is." "No, you don't. That's the lie people tell. You don't choose how memory works. It chooses you." She was right, of course, but I didn't say so. In town I watched the pressure build. People were talking, About Grant buying that girl, about her being a Cartwright, about what it might mean. Clara Brennan warned me. People are nervous. They remember what happened last time someone challenged Dalton's claim to that land. What happened? Man named Peterson claimed his deed showed the Cartwright water rights extended to his property. Said Dalton owed him for years of water use. Found him 3 days later. Horse threw him, they said. Broke his neck. Convenient. Isn't it always? The saloon talk got louder, uglier. I heard men saying Grant was trying to play savior, trying to buy redemption with $20 like it was that easy. And I heard worse. Speculation about what Grant really wanted from a 17-year-old girl. Suggestions that made my stomach turn. One night I was in my room at the boarding house when I heard shouting in the street. I looked out the window. 2 men were arguing. One of them was Deputy Frank Worthy, the young man I'd seen with Dalton at the auction. The other was a farmer I recognized from church. "Not right," the farmer was saying. "You know it's not right." "I don't make the laws," Frank said. But his voice was uncertain, defensive. "You enforce them. That's the same thing." "I do my job." "Your job is protecting people like Dalton while the rest of us suffer. My cattle are dying because I can't afford his water prices." "Take it up with the sheriff." "The sheriff is the problem." Frank's hand moved to his gun. The farmer saw it, backed up, hands raised. "Go home," Frank said. "Sleep it off." The farmer left. But I saw his face as he walked away, saw the anger and helplessness written there, and I saw Frank's face after, saw him stand alone in the street looking at his own hand on his gun like it belonged to someone else. He looked up and saw me in the window. For a long moment we stared at each other. Then he turned and walked toward the sheriff's office, shoulders hunched like a man carrying weight he didn't know how to set down. It was Lena who found the trunk. I wasn't there when it happened. Grant told me about it later, his voice hollow. She'd been in the barn looking for tools. Saw an old trunk pushed into a corner covered with dusty canvas. She'd noticed it before, 3-4 times over the past week. Each time she'd seen Grant glance at it when he thought she wasn't looking, seen him position himself between her and it. So naturally she'd gotten curious. She waited until Grant rode into town for supplies. Then she went to the barn with a piece of wire and picked the lock. Inside she found papers, letters, ledgers, property deeds, water rights documents, correspondence between Samuel McCabe and Dalton Reeves. She sat on the barn floor and read it all. Every word, every damning detail. By the time Grant came back, she knew everything. She was sitting on the porch when he arrived. The papers were spread out around her. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. Grant saw the papers and froze. "Lena, your father," she said. Her voice was very quiet, very controlled. "He didn't just want our land. He wanted the water underneath it." Grant said nothing. "These letters, these deeds, he planned it for months. Convinced Dalton that my father was a Confederate sympathizer, a traitor, knew the Union would come down hard on traitors." "Yes. And after my family was dead, after our home was burned, your father took the land, took the water rights." "He did." She looked up at him. Her eyes were dry but burning. "The aquifer underneath our farm. It feeds half the county, doesn't it?" "Yes." "And whoever controls it controls everything. Who farms, who prospers, who survives." "Yes." "Your father got rich off my family's murder." Grant's face was gray. "He did. And then Dalton took it from him. That's what these deeds show. My father sold the land to Dalton for almost nothing a year before he died. I think Dalton threatened him. Or maybe my father just wanted to make sure I never inherited blood money. Either way, Dalton got everything." Lena stood up. The papers fell from her lap, scattering in the wind. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. "It means Dalton built his empire on your family's bones. It means legally this land belongs to me. I'm the last living Cartwright. I'm the rightful heir." Grant nodded slowly. "I know." "How long have you known?" Since before I bought you. I saw your name in the auction listing. I knew who you were. I knew what you could claim if you knew the truth. And you bought me anyway. I bought you because you deserved to live, because I owed your family that much. Whether you claim the land or not, that's your choice, but you deserve to know the truth. Lena walked down the porch steps, walked past him, stopped. I could destroy him, she said. Dalton, I could take everything he has, make him suffer like my family suffered. You could. Would you help me? Grant looked at her. I'd help you do whatever you decide to do, but I won't tell you what that should be. That's not my right. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Everyone wants to tell me what to do. Sell me, use me, save me. And now, the one time I actually need advice, you won't give it. Because it's your choice, not mine, not anyone else's, yours. She stood there, the wind whipping her dress around her legs, her hair loose and wild. I don't know what to do, she said, and for the first time since I'd met her, she sounded young, lost. I don't know how to be the person who makes these choices. Then take your time, Grant said. Figure it out. There's no rush. Dalton knows I'm here. He knows who I am. I know. He's going to come for me. I know that too, and I won't let him take you. She looked at him, really looked, searching his face for the lie, the angle, the betrayal. Why? She asked. Why do you care what happens to me? Is it just guilt? Is that all this is? Grant was quiet for a long time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rust and gold. When I was a boy, he said finally, my father used to take me hunting. He'd shoot deer, rabbits, whatever we could find. And he'd make me gut them. Said it would make me strong. Teach me that the world was hard and you had to be harder. He paused, looked at his hands. One day we shot a doe. She wasn't dead yet. She was bleeding, suffering, looking at me with these eyes that knew she was dying. My father told me to finish her, end her suffering. I couldn't do it. I froze. He called me weak, pathetic. Said I'd never be half the man he was. What happened to the doe? He killed her. And he was right, I am weak. But I learned something that day. I learned that being like my father, being hard enough to not feel anything, that's not strength. That's just emptiness. He looked at Lena. You asked me why I care. I care because I've spent 30 years being the kind of weak my father despised, the kind that feels too much and does too little. And when I saw you on that platform, I saw a chance to be weak in a different way. The kind that actually helps someone instead of just standing by while they suffer. Lena said nothing for a long moment. Then, that's the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth. Truth doesn't always help. No, but it's all I have to give you. She picked up one of the scattered papers. A deed. Her family's land signed over to Samuel McCabe, dated 2 weeks after the massacre. I want to take it back, she said. All of it. The land, the water, everything Dalton stole. Then we'll figure out how. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is. People could die. Grant nodded. I know. I rode out to the ranch the next day and found them both in the barn. Lena was reading through papers, making notes. Grant was sharpening tools, preparing. Reverend, Grant said when he saw me. We were about to send for you. Were you? Lena looked up. We need your help. I sat down on a hay bale. I'm listening. She spread the papers out, showed me the deeds, the water rights documents, the correspondence. This proves Dalton's claim is fraudulent, she said. Samuel McCabe had no legal right to the land. He acquired it through false pretenses, accusing my father of treason, using military force to commit murder. Every transaction after that is built on illegal grounds. You'll need a lawyer, I said. We'll need more than that. We'll need witnesses, people willing to testify about what happened that night. There were dozens of people involved, soldiers, townspeople. Someone must remember. Grant shook his head. Most of the soldiers are gone, scattered after the war, and the townspeople who remember are too scared to speak. Dalton has power here. He's the law. Who's going to stand up to him? There must be someone, I said. Lena looked at me. Clara Brennan was there. She told me. She lived on a farm near ours. She saw the smoke, heard the screams. Will she testify? I don't know, but I'm going to ask her. We rode into town together that afternoon. Lena Grant and me. People stared as we passed. The girl who'd been sold for $20, the man who'd bought her, and the preacher who couldn't mind his own business. We must have made quite a picture. We found Clara at her house. She opened the door and her face went pale when she saw Lena. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "You look just like your mother." Lena's composure cracked just a little. "You knew her." "I did. Mary Cartwright was my friend. She used to bring me eggs from her chickens. We'd sit on my porch and shell peas together. She was kind, good. She didn't deserve what happened. No one did." Clara looked past Lena to Grant and me. "You'd better come inside." We sat in her kitchen. Clara made coffee with shaking hands. "I knew this day would come," she said. "Knew eventually someone would ask me to speak the truth about that night. I've been dreading it for 8 years." "Will you do it?" Lena asked. "Will you testify?" Clara set down her coffee cup. "What good would it do? Dalton's the sheriff. The law here. Who would I testify to?" "Circuit judge comes through in the spring," I said. "If we can build a case, present evidence, get witnesses." "Witnesses?" Clara laughed, sharp, bitter. "You mean people willing to sign their own death warrants? Because that's what it would be. Dalton won't let this go without a fight." "So we do nothing." Lena's voice was hard. "Let him keep what he stole. Let my family stay unavenged. Vengeance won't bring them back, child." "No, but justice might give them peace." Clara looked at her, really looked, saw the determination there, the steel underneath the scars. "You're your father's daughter," she said. He had that same look when he'd made up his mind about something, stubborn as a mule and twice as proud. "Will you help me?" Clara was quiet for a long time. Outside a dog barked. Children played in the street. Normal life carrying on like it always did. "I'll help," she said finally. "But we'll need more than just me. My word against Dalton's won't be enough." "Who else was there?" Grant asked. Who else saw what happened? Clara thought. "Ezra Polk, old ranch hand who worked for the family next to yours. He's still alive. Lives in a shack east of town. Half blind now, but his memory's sharp." "Anyone else?" "Some of the soldiers might still be around. Deputy Frank Worthy's father was one of them. Died 5 years back, but he used to talk about that night when he was drunk. Said it haunted him. Said they murdered innocents on a lie." Lena leaned forward. "Frank Worthy's father was there." "He was, and Frank knows it. I've seen the way he looks when Dalton talks about the old days, the way he gets quiet. He knows his father did wrong." Grant and I exchanged looks. Frank Worthy, the young deputy who was starting to question his loyalties. "We need to talk to him," I said. "He won't betray Dalton," Clara said. "He's too scared." "Maybe," Lena said. "Or maybe he's just waiting for someone to give him a reason to be brave." We found Frank Worthy that evening outside the saloon. He was leaning against a post, smoking, watching the street with eyes that looked older than his years. He saw us coming and straightened up, hand moving toward his gun instinctively. "Easy," Grant said. "We just want to talk." Frank looked at the three of us, at Lena specifically. "You're the Cartwright girl." "I am. I heard you were at Grant's place." "You heard right." He took a long drag on his cigarette. "What do you want?" "The truth," Lena said. "About the night my family died." Frank's face closed off. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Your father was there. He was one of the soldiers." "My father's dead." "I know. But before he died he talked about it. About what Dalton made them do." Frank looked away. "You shouldn't be asking about this." "Why?" "Because it's dangerous. Because Dalton won't like it. Because it won't change anything. What's done is done." Lena stepped closer. Frank didn't back up, but I saw him tense. "My father was murdered," she said. "My mother, my brother. Our home was burned. And the man who ordered it is now rich and powerful while I was sold like livestock. You think that's justice?" "I think it's the past. The past doesn't stay past when it's built on lies and murder." Frank looked at her. I saw something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. "Even if what you say is true, even if Dalton did wrong, what are you going to do about it? He's the sheriff. He has the law on his side. He has corruption on his side. That's not the same thing." "It is in this town." "Then maybe it's time this town changed." Frank laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can change things one girl against the whole system? I'm not one girl. I have Grant, I have Reverend Thorne, I have Clara Brennan, and I have the law on my side, the real law, not Dalton's version of it. The real law says a dead man's daughter has no claim to land sold legally. It wasn't sold legally. It was stolen, and I have the documents to prove it." Frank's eyes widened slightly. "You have proof. Letters, deeds, water rights documents. Everything showing how Samuel McCabe and Dalton Reeves conspired to steal my family's land." That's impossible." "Is it, or did you just never bother to look?" Frank threw his cigarette down, ground it out with his boot. "Even if you have proof, Dalton won't let you use it. He'll come for you. For all of you." "I know." "Then you're fools." "Maybe. But we're fools who are tired of living in a town where murder and theft are rewarded." Frank looked at her for a long moment, then at Grant, then at me. "I can't help you," he said. "I'm sorry, but I can't." He started to walk away. "Your father regretted it," Lena called after him. "He knew what he'd done was wrong. He carried that guilt until the day he died. Are you going to do the same?" Frank stopped. His shoulders were rigid. "Or are you going to be the man he wished he'd been, the one who stood up when it mattered?" Frank turned around. His face was torn, anguished. "You don't understand what you're asking. Dalton, he's not just the sheriff. He's connected. He has friends, resources. If I go against him, I'm a dead man." "If you don't," Lena said quietly, "you're already dead, just too scared to admit it." The words hung in the air. Frank looked at her. At this 17-year-old girl who'd survived hell and was still standing, who had more courage in her broken body than most men had in their whole lives. "I need time," he said, "to think. We don't have much time. Dalton knows we're asking questions. He knows what we found. He's going to move against us soon. Then you'd better be ready. Will you help us?" Frank didn't answer. He just turned and walked into the night. But I noticed something. He didn't go back to the sheriff's office. He walked the other direction, toward the edge of town, toward whatever decision was waiting for him in the darkness. 3 days later, everything changed. I was in my room at the boarding house when I heard the commotion outside, shouting, the sound of horses, people running. I went to the window. Ezra Polk's shack was on fire. I could see the flames from town bright against the night sky, could see men on horses riding away from it. Clara Brennan was in the street screaming. He was in there. Ezra was in there. I ran downstairs. Half the town was already gathering, watching the fire burn. By the time anyone got out there with buckets, it was too late. The shack was gone, and Ezra Polk with it. The official story came quick. Too quick. Ezra's lantern had tipped over. Old man, half blind, probably knocked it over himself. Tragic accident. But Clara and I knew better. And when I saw Frank Worthy's face as he stood at the edge of the crowd, I knew he knew better too. Dalton was sending a message. This is what happens to people who talk, to people who remember too much. Stay silent or burn. The next morning I rode out to Grant's ranch. They were both in the cabin. Lena was pacing. Grant was cleaning his rifle. "You heard," I said. "We heard." Lena's voice was tight, controlled, but I could see the rage underneath. Ezra was going to testify. Clara told him what we were doing. He said he'd speak the truth. And now he's dead. Murdered. by Dalton or his men. Grant looked up from his rifle. We can't prove that. We don't need to prove it. Everyone knows. Knowing and proving are different things. Lena slammed her hand on the table. How many more people have to die before someone does something my family? Peterson, now Ezra. How many? I don't know, Grant said quietly. But rushing into a confrontation with Dalton right now would just add us to that list. So we hide, we run, we prepare, we build our case, we wait for the circuit judge. The circuit judge won't come until spring, that's months away. Then we survive for months. Lena looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You think Dalton's going to let us sit here for months gathering evidence, talking to witnesses? He just burned a man alive to keep him quiet. Grant set down his rifle, stood up, walked to her. I know you want justice. I know you want it now. But getting yourself killed won't bring your family back. It won't stop Dalton. It'll just give him what he wants. What he wants is my silence. Then don't give it to him. Speak. Build your case. But do it smart. Do it safe. Lena laughed. Harsh. There's no such thing as safe. Not here. Not with him. She was right, of course. We all knew it. The question was what to do about it. That night Frank Worthy came to the ranch. He rode in quiet after dark, tied his horse away from the cabin and knocked on the door like he was afraid of being heard. Grant let him in. Lena and I were both there. We'd been planning, trying to figure out our next move. Frank stood in the doorway, hat in hands. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. I know what you're going to say, he said. You're going to ask if I had anything to do with Ezra's death. Did you? Lena asked. No. But I knew it was coming. Dalton told me and the other deputies to stay away from that part of town last night. Said he had business to handle. I knew what that meant. And you did nothing. What could I do? If I'd tried to stop it, I'd be dead too. At least you'd die clean. Frank flinched. You're right. And that's why I'm here. He pulled out a folded paper from inside his coat, set it on the table. This is a deposition, written by my father before he died. He gave it to me, made me promise to keep it safe. Said someday it might matter. Lena picked it up, started reading. Her face went pale. This is... He confesses everything. The false accusations, the attack, the murder. He couldn't live with what he'd done, couldn't forgive himself. So he wrote it all down, every detail. Names, dates, orders given, all of it. Why didn't you come forward with this before? Grant asked. Frank looked at the floor. Because I was a coward. Because I knew what it would mean. But Ezra's death, watching that fire burn, I can't do it anymore. I can't be part of this. Lena looked at him. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll testify. I'll bring this deposition before the circuit judge. I'll tell what I know. I'll stand with you. Dalton will kill you. Probably. But at least I'll die doing the right thing. That's more than my father got. The room was silent. Outside the wind rattled the windows. Thank you, Lena said finally. This changes everything. Does it? We still have to survive until the judge comes. And Dalton knows we're building a case. He's not going to sit idle. No, Grant said. He's not. As if summoned by the speaking of his name, we heard hoofbeats outside. Multiple horses, coming fast. We all froze. Grant moved to the window, looked out. His face went hard. Dalton, with 6 men, all armed. Lena reached for the rifle. Grant put his hand over hers. Not yet. Let's hear what he wants. We know what he wants. Let's hear it anyway. Frank looked terrified. If he sees me here, then hide. Barn, go. Frank ran out the back door. We heard him scrambling toward the barn. The hoofbeats stopped. Boots on the porch, then a knock. Not demanding, almost polite. That made it worse somehow. Grant opened the door. Dalton stood there backlit by torches his men carried. He was smiling. Grant, Lena, Reverend, quite the gathering you've got here. What do you want, Dalton? Just came by to check on my old friend, make sure everything's all right. Heard there was a fire in town. Terrible tragedy. Wanted to make sure no accidents were happening out here. We're fine. That's good. That's real good. Dalton's eyes moved past Grant to where Lena stood. And how are you settling in, Miss Cartwright? Grant treating you well? Lena said nothing. Not much of a talker, are you? That's all right. Actions speak louder than words anyway. He pulled something from his pocket. A folded paper. See, I've been doing some reading myself. Old property records, water rights, interesting stuff. He unfolded the paper. It was a deed. To the Cartwright land. This here says I own the land your family used to work. Bought it fair and square from Samuel McCabe. All legal, all proper. It's not legal if it was acquired through murder, Lena said. Dalton's smile widened. You'd have to prove that. And proof requires witnesses. Witnesses like old Ezra Polk. Oh wait, he's dead. Tragic accident. We have other witnesses. Do you, Clara Brennan? An old widow whose word against mine, the circuit judge won't care. He folded the deed, put it back in his pocket. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this crusade. Stop asking questions. Stop stirring up trouble. And in return, I'll let you live here in peace. And if we don't? Grant asked. Dalton's smile faded. Then I'll do what I should have done 8 years ago. Finish the job properly this time. He turned to leave. Stopped. Oh, and Grant, I know Frank Worthy was here. I know he gave you something. Tell him when I find him it won't be quick. He walked back to his horse, mounted up. You've got 3 days, he called back. 3 days to make your choice. After that, the choice gets made for you. They rode off, torches fading into the distance. We stood there silent until the sound of hoofbeats disappeared completely. Then Lena spoke. 3 days. 3 days, Grant confirmed. Frank emerged from the barn shaking. He knows. He knows I betrayed him. We need to leave, I said. All of us, tonight. Get to the territorial capital. Bring the evidence to the authorities there. We won't make it, Grant said. Dalton will have men watching the roads. We'd be dead before we got 10 miles. Then we fight. Everyone looked at Lena. We have proof. We have witnesses. We have right on our side. And we have 3 days to prepare. So we use them. We bring the fight to him. That's suicide, Frank said. Living under his thumb is suicide, just slower. She looked at Grant. You said you'd help me do whatever I decided. I've decided. We fight. Grant looked at her. At this girl who'd been broken and sold and survived anyway. Who was choosing to stand when running would be easier. All right, he said. We fight. I thought about my vow to bear witness. About 40 years preaching peace and forgiveness. And I thought about how sometimes the only witness worth giving is the kind that stands with the people who've been wronged, not just watches from safety. I'll stand with you, I said. Frank looked at all of us like we were insane. You're going to get killed. Maybe, Lena said, but we're going to make him work for it. And even if we die, the truth dies with us loud, not silent. She walked to the table, spread out the papers, the deeds, the letters, Frank's father's deposition. 3 days, she said. We use them to get ready, to gather what allies we can, to prepare. And then, I asked. She looked up. Her green eyes were hard, determined. And then we show Dalton Reeves what happens when you build an empire on bones. Eventually the bones stand up. The next morning, word spread through town like wildfire. The Cartwright girl was challenging Dalton's claim. She had proof, witnesses. She was calling him out. People reacted in different ways. Some locked their doors, scared of being caught in the crossfire. Some came to Clara's house offering quiet support, offering to stand with us when the time came, and some went straight to Dalton, telling him everything, trying to curry favor with the man who controlled the water and therefore their lives. Clara counted maybe 20 people willing to publicly support Lena's claim. Not many, but more than nothing. Grant spent those 3 days preparing the ranch, reinforcing doors, positioning weapons, setting up fields of fire. He'd been a soldier once. He remembered how to prepare for battle. Frank Worthy moved between town and ranch gathering information, watching Dalton's movements. He was terrified, but he kept going anyway. And Lena spent those 3 days writing. She wrote down everything she remembered about her family, every detail of the night they died, every year of suffering that followed. She wrote her father's story, her mother's, her brother's. She wrote it all down so that even if she died, the truth would survive. On the third morning, I found her on the porch watching the sun rise. "Ready?" I asked. "No," she said, "but I'm doing it anyway." That's all courage is, doing the thing even when you're scared. You think we'll win? I think you've already won. Just by standing up. She smiled, sad. That's a preacher's answer, not a real one. You want the real answer? I don't know. Dalton has power, resources, men. We have truth and anger and not much else. In a fair fight, that's enough. But this won't be a fair fight. I know. And you're still going through with it. I don't have a choice. I've spent 8 years being other people's property, being nobody. If I back down now, I'm still nobody. At least this way I'm somebody, even if it's just for a little while. The sun broke over the horizon. Golden light spilled across the land. Lena's land, her family's land, stolen and sold and built over with lies, but still hers. Whatever happens today, I said, you should know your father would be proud of you. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. You didn't know my father. I know you. That's enough. We sat there as the sun climbed higher, waiting for whatever came next, and around noon it came. Dalton Reeves with 12 armed men riding up the road toward Grant's ranch, coming to finish what he'd started 8 years ago, coming to bury the past once and for all. But the past wasn't ready to be buried. Not anymore. They came at noon when the sun was highest and shadows were shortest. 12 men on horseback riding slow and deliberate, not rushing, not hiding, making sure everyone in the county could see them coming. Dalton Reeves at the front, silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. Behind him, his deputies. Behind them, men I recognized from town. Good men or men who'd been good once before, fear turned them into followers. Grant, Lena, Frank, and I watched from the porch. We'd known they were coming, had been watching the road since dawn. Clara Brennan stood with us. She'd refused to leave. Said she'd hidden once when the Cartwrights died. Wouldn't hide again. Behind us in the yard, maybe 15 townspeople had gathered. Not many, but enough to witness, enough to remember. Dalton reined in about 30 yards from the house, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid immediate gunfire. "Grant McCabe," he called out. His voice was pleasant, conversational. "We need to have ourselves a conversation." "Then talk," Grant said. "I'd prefer to do it civilized, you and me. No guns, no witnesses, just 2 old friends settling a disagreement." "We're not friends, Dalton." "No, I suppose we're not. Not anymore. But we were once. Remember that 2 boys running through these hills? Thought we'd conquer the world together. We were children. We didn't know what the world cost." Dalton smiled. "I knew. You were always the soft one, Grant. Always worried about doing right instead of doing what needed to be done." "Doing what needed to be done," Grant repeated. "Is that what you call murder now?" The smile faded. "Careful. Or what you'll kill me like you killed the Cartwrights, like you killed Ezra Polk. Ezra Polk died in an accident." "Did he?" Dalton's hand moved toward his gun. The men behind him tensed, but he didn't draw. Not yet. "I didn't come here to debate the past," he said. "I came to settle the present. You've got something that doesn't belong to you. Information, documents. I want them back. They never belonged to you in the first place. Everything in this county belongs to me." Dalton's voice was hard now, cold. "The land, the water, the people. I built this place from nothing. I made it what it is." Lena stepped forward. I'd told her to stay back, but she didn't listen. Of course she didn't. "You built it on my family's graves," she said. Dalton looked at her, really looked for the first time since he'd arrived. His eyes narrowed. "You look like your mother," he said. "Same eyes, same stubborn set to your jaw. She had that too right before I—" He stopped himself, smiled. "Right before she died. Before you killed her. Before she made a choice to stand in front of a rifle. Choices have consequences, girl. She learned that. So will you." "The only thing I'm learning," Lena said, "is that men like you need people to be afraid. That's your power. Not the badge. Not the land. Fear. And I'm not afraid of you anymore." Dalton laughed. "You should be." "Why?" "Because you'll kill me. You already destroyed my life. You took everything. What's left for me to fear? Pain, suffering, watching everyone around you die before you do. I've already watched everyone around me die. You did that when I was 9 years old. You think you can scare me with threats now?" Something flickered in Dalton's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or recognition that the girl standing before him wasn't the terrified child he'd left in the ashes. "Last chance," he said. "Give me the documents. Drop this crusade. Walk away. I'll let you live." "No. No. I'm not walking away. This land is mine by right. The water underneath it is mine. Everything you've built is stolen, and I'm taking it back." Dalton's face went cold. "Then you're a fool." "Maybe. But I'm a fool who has the law on my side." "I am the law. You're a man with a badge who committed murder and theft. That's not law. That's just violence with a uniform." Dalton stared at her. Then he looked at the men behind her, at the townspeople who'd gathered to witness. "Anyone who stands with her is choosing treason," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Treason against the duly appointed authority of this county. I'll see you all hanged." No one moved. No one spoke. But no one left either. Dalton's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake. All of you." "The only mistake," Clara Brennan said, stepping forward, "was letting you get away with murder for 8 years. Dalton looked at her. "Clara, I'm disappointed. I thought you had more sense." "I had too much sense. Kept quiet when I should have spoken. But I'm done being quiet." "You'll regret that." "I've regretted my silence every day since the Cartwrights died. Can't feel much worse than that." Other voices spoke up then. A farmer. "You're charging us too much for water." A shopkeeper. "My brother died in that fire you called an accident." A widow. "You told me my husband fell from his horse, but I saw the bruises." One by one, people who'd been silent for years found their voices, and Dalton saw his power crumbling. "Enough!" His voice cracked like a whip. "I gave you a choice. You made it. Now live with the consequences." He turned to his men. "Burn it. Burn it all. The house, the barn, everything. And anyone who tries to stop you burns with it." The men hesitated. They'd signed up to enforce the law, not commit massacre in broad daylight with witnesses. "That's an order!" Dalton shouted. One of the deputies dismounted, pulled out a torch, soaked it in kerosene. And that's when Frank Worthy stepped forward. "No." The deputy stopped. Everyone turned to look at Frank. He stood alone halfway between Dalton's men and our group, caught between loyalties, between the man he'd been and the man he needed to become. "Frank," Dalton said quietly, dangerously, "get back in line. I can't do this." "Yes, you can. You're my deputy. You follow my orders." "Not these orders. Not anymore." Frank unbuckled his gun belt, let it fall to the ground. The gesture was so simple, so final. "My father killed innocent people because you told him to," Frank said. "He spent the rest of his life regretting it. I'm not making the same mistake. Your father was weak, just like you. Maybe. But he was honest about it at the end. He wrote down what he did, every detail, and I gave that deposition to them. So even if you burn everything here, the truth survives. Dalton's face went white, then red, then something beyond color. You betrayed me. You betrayed everything a badge is supposed to stand for. Dalton drew his gun, fast, pointed it at Frank. Then you die first. Time seemed to slow. I saw Dalton's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Frank standing there unarmed accepting his fate, saw Lena reaching for the rifle, and I saw something else. Movement from the group of Dalton's men. One of them an older deputy I'd seen around town drawing his own gun, but not pointing it at Frank, pointing it at Dalton. Put it down, Sheriff. Dalton froze. What? I said put it down. I didn't sign up for this. None of us did. Another deputy spoke up. He's right. This has gone too far. You're my men. We're lawmen, or supposed to be. This ain't law. This is murder. Dalton looked around, saw his authority dissolving, saw men who'd followed him for years suddenly questioning, suddenly choosing. You're all traitors, he hissed. No, the older deputy said. We're just done being part of your lies. Dalton's gun wavered. He was outnumbered now, outmaneuvered. Everything he'd built, everything he'd controlled, slipping through his fingers. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Lena's voice cut through the tension, clear, strong. You're done, Dalton. Everyone here knows what you did, what you are. The circuit judge will hear testimony from Frank's father's deposition, from Clara, from everyone you've silenced over the years. You're finished. Dalton looked at her, and in his eyes I saw something terrible. Not acceptance, not surrender, desperation. A desperate man is more dangerous than an angry one. If I'm finished, he said, then I'm taking you with me. He spurred his horse, not toward Frank, toward Lena, gun raised, finger on the trigger. Everything happened at once. Grant threw himself in front of Lena, shielding her with his body. The gun fired. The sound was enormous in the still air. Grant stumbled, fell, blood spreading across his shoulder. Lena screamed. Dalton's horse reared. He fought to control it, failed. And as the horse bucked and turned, something happened that I didn't expect. One of the townspeople, a farmer named Morrison, grabbed a rope from his wagon, threw it, lassoed Dalton's arm. The rope pulled tight. Dalton was yanked from his saddle, hit the ground hard. The gun flew from his hand. For a moment everything was still. Then Dalton scrambled to his feet, looked around, saw men advancing from all sides, not just the townspeople, his own deputies, former allies, everyone. He ran, not toward his horse, not toward his men, toward the one thing he thought could save him, the creek. Behind Grant's property, maybe 300 yards away, there was a creek that fed from the aquifer underneath the Cartwright land, the water he'd controlled for 8 years, the source of his power. He ran for it like a drowning man swimming toward surface. We followed, not running, walking, slow and steady. By the time we reached the creek, Dalton was in the water, waist deep. The current was stronger than it looked, fed by recent rains upstream. "Stay back," he shouted. "All of you." We stopped at the bank. Lena stood at the front. Grant leaned against me, hand pressed to his wounded shoulder. The blood was flowing but not spurting. He'd live. "It's over, Dalton," Lena said. "It's not over until I say it's over. This is my water, my land, mine. It was never yours. You stole it. I took it. There's a difference." "No, there's not." Dalton tried to move toward the bank. The current caught him, stronger than he'd expected. His feet slipped on the rocks. "Help me," he said. Not a command anymore. A plea. No one moved. "Grant," Dalton's voice cracked. "We're brothers, remember? We fought together, survived together. Don't let me die like this." Grant looked at him. This man who'd been his friend, who'd become his enemy, who'd built an empire on bones and was now drowning in the water that empire was founded on. "You made your choices, Dalton," Grant said quietly. "Live with them, or don't. Please." The current pulled harder. Dalton lost his footing, went under, came up sputtering. "Someone help him," Clara said. Not because she forgave him, but because she was a decent person who couldn't watch anyone drown. Frank Worthy started toward the water. Dalton saw him coming, saw rescue, reached out his hand, and the creek bed gave way beneath him. The aquifer had carved channels through the limestone over thousands of years, underground caves and pockets. Most were stable, some weren't. Dalton stepped on one that wasn't. The ground crumbled. He dropped like a stone, disappeared into dark water. Frank waded in, dove under, came up empty-handed, dove again. Nothing. The current had taken him, down into the channels, into the water he'd hoarded and sold and built his power on. We stood there watching the creek flow past, watching for any sign of him. None came. "He's gone," Frank said finally, crawled out of the water, sat on the bank breathing hard. Lena stood very still, staring at the water. "Is it wrong," she asked quietly, "that I'm not sad?" "No," I said. "It's honest. I thought I'd feel something, relief maybe, or satisfaction. But I just feel empty. Justice doesn't fill the spaces grief creates. It just stops the bleeding." She nodded, turned away from the creek. Grant was pale, losing blood. Clara and I helped him back toward the house. The deputies searched the creek for the rest of the day. Never found Dalton's body. The aquifer must have carried him deep into the underground network. Maybe he'd surface somewhere downstream. Maybe he never would. Either way, he was gone. The next few days passed in a blur. A territorial marshal came down from the capital, took statements from everyone, examined Frank's father's deposition, reviewed the documents Lena had found. The marshal was a hard man with tired eyes. He'd seen enough corruption to know it when he smelled it. "This is a mess," he told me on the third day. We were sitting in Clara's parlor. He was drinking coffee. I was drinking something stronger. "Will there be charges?" I asked. "Against Dalton? He's dead. Can't charge a dead man. Against his men, the ones who participated in the Cartwright massacre, most are dead or scattered. Statute of limitations on some of it. Federal jurisdiction questions on the rest. So nothing." "I didn't say that. The land deeds will be reviewed. Lena Cartwright has a strong claim, the water rights especially. Samuel McCabe's acquisition was fraudulent. Everything that came after is built on that fraud. She'll get her land back. Looks that way, though it'll take time, lawyers, paperwork, these things always do. And in the meantime," the marshal looked at me, "in the meantime people need water to survive. Dalton's dead, but his infrastructure is still there. The wells, the distribution system. Someone needs to manage it. Someone like Lena. Someone like Lena." He finished his coffee, stood to leave, stopped. "Reverend, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of bad men get away with bad things. It's nice just once to see something that looks like justice, even if it came messy." After he left, I sat there thinking about what he'd said. Justice. Messy justice. The kind that doesn't arrive clean and simple like in stories. The kind that's mixed with grief and loss and questions that don't have answers. But justice, nonetheless. Grant recovered slowly. The bullet had gone through his shoulder. Clean wound, no bone damage. But he'd lost blood, and the shock of it had weakened him. Lena tended him. I watched her change his bandages, bring him food, help him walk when he was strong enough to stand. She did it without comment, without fuss. But there was something in the way she moved around him. Careful, deliberate, like she was figuring out who he was beyond the guilt he carried. One afternoon I found them on the porch. Grant was sitting in a chair, arm in a sling. Lena was on the steps whittling a piece of wood. "What are you making?" I asked. "Nothing, just keeping my hands busy." I sat down beside her. Grant dozed in the afternoon heat. "The marshal says the land will be yours," I said. "Officially." "I know. He told me." "That's good news?" "Is it?" She didn't look up from her whittling. "I don't know what to do with land. I don't know how to farm. Don't know how to run a ranch. All I know is how to survive." "You could learn." "Could I? Or would I just be another person trying to hold on to something that's already cost too much blood? What are you saying? She set down the knife, looked out at the land stretching away toward the horizon. I'm saying maybe the land isn't the point. Maybe holding on to it, fighting over it, controlling it. Maybe that's what made my father a target in the first place. What made Samuel McCabe greedy? What made Dalton a killer? So, what will you do? I don't know yet, but I know what I won't do. I won't let this land destroy anyone else. Grant stirred, opened his eyes. You're talking about the water rights. You should be resting, Lena said. I've been resting for 3 days. I can hear. Then yes, I'm talking about the water rights. Grant was quiet for a moment. What are you thinking? I'm thinking water shouldn't belong to anyone. It should be shared, free, available to whoever needs it. That's a significant amount of money you'd be giving up. I don't care about money. Money didn't save my family. It didn't save Ezra. It won't bring back the years I lost. What will you do without it? How will you live? Lena smiled. It was small, tired, but real. The same way I've lived for 8 years, day by day, except this time I'll be doing it free. Free, Grant repeated, like he was testing the word. Yes, free. No debts, no obligations. No one owning me or claiming me or telling me what I should do. Where will you go? She looked at him. I don't know. Maybe I'll stay for a while. Maybe I won't. But it'll be my choice. Something passed between them then. An understanding maybe. Or a kind of peace with the fact that some questions don't have easy answers. A week after Dalton died, Lena made her announcement. She stood in front of the church, the one building in town large enough to hold everyone who wanted to hear. Maybe 60, 70 people. More than I expected. The marshal was there. Frank Worthy, Clara, Grant, me, and a lot of townspeople who'd lived under Dalton's control for years and were trying to figure out what came next. Lena stood at the front. No notes, no prepared speech, just her and her voice and the truth. My name is Lena Cartwright, she said. 8 years ago my family was murdered. Our land was stolen. For 8 years I was sold and used and treated like I was nothing. Like I was nobody. Her voice was steady, clear, carrying to the back of the room. I could stand here and tell you about hate, about revenge, about how good it felt to watch Dalton Reeves drown in the water he stole from my family. But that's not why I'm here. She paused, looked at the faces staring back at her. I'm here because I've learned something. Hate is easy. Revenge is easy. What's hard is choosing something different, choosing to break the cycle instead of continuing it. She held up a paper, the deed to the Cartwright land. This land is mine by right. The water underneath it is mine. I could charge you for it, make you pay like Dalton did. I could get rich off it. And part of me wants to. Part of me wants to make everyone who stayed silent while my family died pay for what they didn't stop. Someone in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, but I'm not going to do that. Because making you suffer won't bring my family back. It won't give me the childhood I lost. It won't heal anything. She set the deed on the pulpit in front of her. So I'm making the water free, public resource, managed by the county, not by one person. Everyone gets access, fair, equal, the way it should have been all along. Silence. Then someone started clapping, then another, then the whole room. Lena raised her hand. The applause faded. I'm not doing this to be noble. I'm doing it because I'm tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being angry. Tired of carrying weight that was never mine to carry in the first place. She looked directly at me, at Grant, at Clara. Someone once told me that freedom can't be given. It has to be claimed. I'm claiming mine, and I'm giving all of you the chance to claim yours. Free water, free land, free from the control of one person who got rich off everyone else's suffering. She stepped back from the pulpit. That's all I have to say. The room erupted. Questions, gratitude, disbelief. But Lena didn't stay to answer. She walked out of the church into the afternoon sunlight. I found her later sitting under the lightning-struck oak tree, the one that was half dead and half alive, the one that marked the path to the auction barn where this had all started. That was quite a speech, I said. It was true. Truth doesn't always play well with crowds. I don't care about crowds. I care about being able to sleep at night. I sat down beside her. You're giving up a fortune. I never had a fortune. Can't give up what you never had. You know what I mean. She pulled up a blade of grass, twisted it between her fingers. My father used to tell me that land doesn't belong to us. We just borrow it for a while, take care of it, pass it on. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I think I do now. What did he mean? That holding on to things too tight, land, money, power, it changes you, makes you hard, makes you willing to do things you shouldn't do. My father held his land with open hands. He shared. He helped neighbors, and Samuel McCabe saw that as weakness. It wasn't weakness. No, but the world punished him for it anyway. She let the grass blade fall. I can't change what the world is, but I can choose who I am in it, and I choose to be like my father, not like the men who killed him. We sat in silence for a while. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows lengthened. What will you do now? I asked. I don't know. Stay for a while, I think. Make sure the water transition happens right. Make sure people who need it get it. And after I'll see. Maybe I'll stay. Maybe I'll go. Maybe I'll figure out who Lena Cartwright is when she's not running or hiding or fighting. You could do worse than staying, building a life here. She looked at me. Could I? This town watched my family die, stood by while I was sold, stayed silent for 8 years. Some did, but some didn't. Clara spoke up. Frank chose truth. Others came forward when it mattered. Is that enough? Is that supposed to make it okay? No, but it's something. A foundation, maybe. Something to build on. She didn't answer, just stared out at the land that was hers now, the land that had cost so much. Grant started building the crosses 2 days later. I found him in the barn, arm still in a sling, working one-handed with a saw and hammer. 2 pieces of wood cut and shaped, simple, unadorned. What are you doing? I asked. What I should have done 8 years ago. He held up the cross. It was rough, plain, but honest. For the Cartwrights, he said. A marker. Something to say they lived. That they mattered. Where will you put them? Near the house. Where the old Cartwright place used to be. I asked Lena. She said yes. I helped him carry the wood to the site. It was just a patch of ground now. The fire had taken everything, but you could still see the outline of where the foundation had been, where a family had built their life. We dug holes, set the crosses, 3 of them, one for Robert, one for Mary, one for Thomas. Grant carved the names himself. His injured arm made it difficult. The letters weren't perfect, but they were clear. Robert Cartwright, beloved father. Mary Cartwright, beloved mother. Thomas Cartwright, beloved son. When he finished, he stood back and looked at them. It's not enough, he said. No, but it's something. I should have done this years ago. Should have stood up to my father. Should have warned them. Should have doesn't change what was, only what is. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you think they'd forgive me if they could? I don't know. Does it matter? It matters to me. Then maybe the question isn't whether they'd forgive you. Maybe it's whether you can forgive yourself. Grant looked at me. His eyes were wet. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. But I think it starts with doing the right thing now, not punishing yourself for the wrong thing then. We stood there as the sun set. 3 crosses casting long shadows across scorched earth. Lena came to see them the next day. She stood there for a long time, silent, just looking. Then she knelt down, touched each cross, traced the letters of her family's names. Grant and I stood back, giving her space. When she finally stood, her face was wet. But she wasn't sobbing, just quiet tears, the kind that come when grief is old enough to be gentle. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the pocket watch. Her father's watch, the one she'd kept for 8 years, the one that had ticked away time through every hell she'd survived. She opened it. The ticking was soft, steady, still keeping time, even though time had stopped for the people it had belonged to. She held it for a moment. Then she knelt and set it at the base of the center cross, her father's cross. "It should stay here," she said, "with him, where it belongs." "Are you sure?" Grant asked. "I'm sure. I don't need to carry them anymore. They can rest now, and so can I." She stood, looked at Grant. "Thank you. For this. It's the least I could do. It's more than most would do." Something passed between them. An understanding. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something. Recognition, maybe. That they were both trying, both carrying weight, both looking for a way to set it down. The circuit judge arrived in late April. Spring had come to Texas. Rain had fallen. The land that had been brown and dry was suddenly green. Wildflowers bloomed. The world was renewing itself like it did every year, regardless of human suffering. The judge set up court in the church. 3 days of testimony. Witnesses, documents, evidence. Frank Worthy testified about his father's deposition, about what he knew. Clara testified about what she'd seen that night, the fire, the screams. Other townspeople testified about Dalton's control, his threats, the way he'd used the water to maintain power. I testified about what I'd witnessed, the auction, the bullet on the fence post, the confrontation at the creek. And Lena testified about her family, about what was taken, about 8 years of being nobody's daughter, somebody's property, always afraid. The judge listened to it all, made notes, asked questions. On the 3rd day he made his ruling. The Cartwright land claim was legitimate. Lena was the rightful heir. All deeds and transfers after the massacre were fraudulent and void. The water rights reverted to the Cartwright estate, which meant to Lena, who immediately transferred them to county management as she'd promised. "This is highly unusual," the judge said. "You're giving up a significant asset." "I'm giving up something that was used to control people," Lena replied. "That's not an asset. That's a weapon." The judge looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. The transfer is accepted. The county will manage the water as a public resource." He banged his gavel. It was done. That night there was a gathering at Clara's house. Not a celebration exactly. More like a collective exhale. The townspeople who'd stood with us. Frank Worthy. The deputies who'd turned on Dalton. Grant. Lena. Me. We ate. Talked. Tried to figure out what normal life looked like after everything that had happened. I found Lena on the porch around midnight. She was staring at the stars. "You all right?" I asked. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel different, like something had changed inside me, but I just feel the same." Justice doesn't change the past. It just stops it from controlling the future. Does it because I still wake up afraid, still flinch when someone moves too fast, still check for exits wherever I go? Those things take time to heal, if they heal at all. That's not very comforting, Reverend. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to be honest with you. She smiled, small, tired. I appreciate that. We stood in silence for a while. Inside I could hear laughter, conversation, people finding their way back to something like normal. "Grant asked me to stay," Lena said. "Permanently. Said I could have the cabin. He'd stay in the barn. We could work the land together." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." "And have you?" "I've thought about it," I'm still thinking about it. What's holding you back? She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft, uncertain. I don't know if I can do it. Stay in one place. Trust someone. Let myself believe it might last. You don't have to decide tonight. I know, but eventually I'll have to decide. Stay or go, trust or run, and I don't know which one scares me more. Both are scary. Both are brave. Whichever you choose, it'll be the right choice because it's yours. She looked at me. You really believe that? I do. Even if I choose wrong. There's no wrong choice when you're choosing for yourself. Only different paths, different lessons. She nodded, turned back to the stars. I think I'll stay, she said. At least for a while, see what it's like to have roots. That sounds like a good start. Does it? I've spent 8 years being pulled up and replanted. What if I don't remember how to grow? Then you learn, same as everything else. I left town 2 weeks later. My work there was done. The story had been witnessed. The testimony had been given. Justice, messy and imperfect as it was, had been served. Before I left, I rode out to Grant's ranch one last time. They were working together when I arrived. Grant was mending fence, one-armed but steady. Lena was hauling water for the chickens. They moved around each other with a kind of careful choreography. Not intimate, not close, but not distant either. Partners, maybe, learning the dance. Reverend, Grant said when he saw me, heard you were leaving. Time to move on. Other places need a traveling preacher. We'll miss you. I'll miss you too. Both of you. Lena set down the water bucket. You're really going? I am. Why, you could stay. The church would have you. The town needs good people. The town has good people. You, Grant, Clara, Frank. You don't need me. Maybe we want you. I smiled. That's kind of you. But my work is witnessing, and I've witnessed what I came to witness. Which was, I looked at them both. This girl who'd survived hell and chosen grace, this man who'd carried guilt until it almost broke him and was learning to set it down. I witnessed redemption, I said. Not the clean kind, not the kind in stories, but the real kind. The kind that comes slow and hurts and doesn't promise happy endings. Just different ones. Lena looked at Grant. Grant looked at his boots. We're not redeemed, he said quietly. I still have nightmares. Still see their faces. Still wish I'd been braver. And I still don't trust easily, Lena added. Still carry a knife. Still think about running. I know, I said. That's what makes it real. You're not fixed. You're just trying. And trying is enough. I mounted my horse, looked back at them one last time. Take care of each other, I said. Not because you owe each other anything, but because you deserve to be cared for. Reverend, Lena called as I started to ride away. Do you think I'll ever forgive him? Really forgive him? I stopped, turned in my saddle. I don't know, I said. But I know you're here. You're trying. And that's more than most people manage. Is it enough? It's a start. I rode back through town one last time, saw the changes already happening. The church had fresh paint. Someone had planted flowers around the general store. Children played in the street without that haunted look they'd had before. Small things, but significant. Clara waved to me from her porch. Frank Worthy nodded as I passed the sheriff's office. He'd been appointed temporary sheriff until elections could be held. Looked uncomfortable in the role, but he was trying. Everyone was trying. At the edge of town, I stopped at the lightning-struck oak, the tree that was half dead and half alive, the one that had marked the path to the auction barn. The barn was gone now, burned by townspeople the day after Dalton died. They'd stood and watched it burn like they were burning the past itself. Maybe they were. I sat there for a while looking back at the town, thinking about everything that had happened, everything I'd seen. A man who'd bought freedom for $20 and learned it cost so much more. A girl who'd been sold for nothing and discovered she was worth everything. A town that had looked away from evil and finally found the courage to look back. Not a perfect ending, not a clean one, but honest. And maybe that's all redemption ever is. Not perfection, just honesty. The willingness to look at what was, acknowledge what is, and try to build what could be. I'm an old man now, 73 years old if my counting's right. My writing days are mostly behind me. I settled down in a small town in New Mexico, got myself a little church, preach on Sundays, tend my garden, watch the sunset. But I think about that Texas town often, about Lena and Grant and what became of them. I got a letter from Clara a year after I left. She wrote that Lena had stayed, that she and Grant had built a life together. Not romantic, not a fairy tale, but real. They worked the land, raised horses, became the kind of neighbors Robert Cartwright had been generous with what they had, willing to help part of the community instead of apart from it. Clara wrote that Lena still had nightmares, still struggled with trust, but she was learning to live with her scars instead of being defined by them. And Grant had stopped punishing himself quite so hard, still visited those crosses every week, still carried the weight. But he'd learned to carry it differently, like a reminder instead of a prison. Frank Worthy got elected sheriff, served 2 terms before stepping down, said he'd done his time enforcing the law, wanted to live without the weight of a badge. The town prospered. The free water meant farms that had been dying came back to life. New families moved in. The population grew. Not rich, not famous, but alive, thriving in the small, quiet way that real communities do. Clara's last letter came 3 years ago. She was writing to tell me that Lena had planted an orchard, apple trees, on the land where her family's house had stood. She said she wanted something living to grow where so much had died, Clara wrote. The trees are still young, won't bear fruit for a few years yet, but she tends them every day, like she's tending her own growth, I suppose, learning to put down roots in soil that holds both ash and potential. I keep that letter in my Bible. Read it sometimes when I'm preparing a sermon about grace or forgiveness or the long, slow work of healing, because that's what Lena's story taught me, that healing isn't an event. It's a process, a daily choice to keep growing even when the soil is scorched, to keep trying even when trust feels impossible, to keep living even when living is hard. And that forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't something you grant once and forget about. It's something you choose again and again. Some days you manage it, some days you don't, and both are okay. Clara's letter ended with a question. She asked me once if I thought her father would be proud of her. I told her yes, without question. But I wonder, what do you think, Reverend? Did she make the right choice, staying, giving up the fortune, trying to build something with a man whose family destroyed hers? I wrote back, told Clara what I believed then and still believe now, that there is no right choice, only different ones. But Lena's choice to stay to try to plant apple trees in ash was the bravest kind, because running is easy, hating is easy, holding on to pain is easy. What's hard is staying, trying, letting something new grow in the place where pain was planted. Lena chose hard, and in choosing it she honored her family more than any revenge could have. She became who they would have wanted her to be, not broken, not bitter, but strong in the way that only broken people who choose to keep living can be. I'm sitting by my fire now here in New Mexico. The wind's picking up outside, smells like rain coming. I'm an old man and my memories are clearer than my eyesight these days. But I can still see that Texas town in my mind. Can still see Lena standing on that auction platform worth nothing to anyone but herself. And I can see her years later planting trees, building, growing, still carrying scars, still dealing with nightmares, still not quite trusting the world not to take everything away again, but trying anyway. People ask me sometimes about forgiveness, about how it works, whether it's possible to forgive the unforgivable. I tell them about Lena and Grant. I tell them that forgiveness isn't a light switch. You don't flip it and suddenly everything's fine. It's more like a sunrise, slow, gradual. Some days you can see it coming. Some days the clouds block it out completely. But if you keep facing east, if you keep showing up, if you keep trying, eventually light comes. Not all at once, not perfectly, but it comes. And I tell them this: Lena never said the words, "I forgive you," to Grant. Not in any letter Clara shared, not in any story I heard, but she stayed. She worked beside him. She planted trees in soil they shared. She built a life on land where her family died. And maybe that's a deeper forgiveness than words could ever be. The kind that says, I'm choosing to live forward instead of backward. I'm choosing to let something grow instead of burning it all down. I'm choosing to trust that tomorrow might be different than yesterday, even when yesterday tried to kill me. That's the hardest choice, and the bravest, and the most honest kind of redemption I've ever witnessed. The fire's dying down now. The rain's started, soft and steady, the kind that soaks in instead of running off. Good rain, growing rain. I'm thinking about those apple trees, wondering if they've borne fruit yet, wondering if Lena stands under them sometimes and thinks about her father, about her mother, about the brother who never got to grow up, wondering if the shade of those trees feels like peace or like ghosts. Probably both. Most things worth having are both. I should go to bed. Old men need their rest. But I'll sit here a little longer, watching the fire burn down, listening to the rain, bearing witness one last time to a story that taught me more about grace than 40 years of preaching ever did. The story of a man who bought freedom for $20, and a girl who taught him what freedom really costs. Not money, not revenge, not even justice, though that matters. Freedom costs the courage to plant seeds in scorched earth and wait for them to grow. Costs the strength to stay when running would be easier. Costs the faith to believe that sunrise is coming even when you're still sitting in the dark. Lena Cartwright paid that cost. Every day, with every choice to stay, every apple tree planted. Every morning she woke up and chose to keep living instead of just surviving. And Grant McCabe paid it too. Every time he visited those crosses. Every time he worked beside her knowing she might never forgive him. Every time he chose to keep trying instead of giving up. They paid it together and separately, in silence and in small words, in work and in waiting. That's redemption, not clean, not easy, not guaranteed, but real. The realest thing I've ever known. The fire's almost out now, just coals glowing in the darkness, like memory, like hope. I'll add one more log, let it burn a while longer, because some stories deserve to be kept warm, passed on, remembered. This is one of them. The story of two people who learned that the weight of the past doesn't have to crush you. It can ground you instead, help you grow deep roots, make you strong enough to weather storms. If you let it, if you choose it, if you plant seeds in the ash and wait. The rain's falling harder now. Good for the land. Good for growing things. I close my eyes and I can see them. Lena and Grant, standing in that orchard. Trees heavy with fruit. Seasons past. Years grown. Still carrying their histories. Still marked by their scars. But alive. Growing. Reaching toward light. Together and apart. Forgiven and not forgiven. Healed and still healing. All of it true, all of it real. That's the story, that's grace, and that's enough.